States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we have a big crowd here tonight, and we always start with public audience.
I'm just saying I'm ready for public audience.
Okay, well, you're ready, but we ask you to come up to the podium. Because of the crowd in here, we ask that you keep your mask on as you speak. We're getting used to doing that, so everybody can do that. You have 5 minutes, and we will kind of cut you off if you go over 5 minutes. So I guess, do we want to start a line? Whoever wants to go up to the public audience, the podium first.
Okay.
Go ahead. And you make sure you state your name and your address, please.
Carl Meyer, 7 Deepwood Road. I'm going to speak on the ambulance tonight. So any of you can go home tonight and your kid can't breathe or they're bleeding seriously. So please hear me. This is probably one of the most important things that you guys are responsible for, public safety and health. So there are 4 people who've written you today, not including myself, with over 100 years combined EMS experience, all who spent time with Simsbury Ambulance. 2 of which were on their board, who sent in comments to the entire Board of Selectmen, so you should all have them, expressing very serious concerns. 2 are out of town, 1 had a prior commitment, and the other one also had a prior commitment, so they couldn't be here, so they sent their notes ahead of time. All 4 of them say that we should go out to bid. Their very experienced voices and their very significant concerns should not be waved away. This is about life and death of ourselves, our children, and our aging parents. There are at least 3 issues that come to light from the presentation. Staffing, commitments that should be made by contract, and the Board of Selectmen having a formal board seat oversight on their board, not just twice a year to hear the highlights. Why would that be resisted by Simsbury Ambulance? Simsbury Ambulance said that there wasn't a seat available for the BOS. And then they suddenly added Chris Kelly, who's a great guy, but who the chair knows very well. Responses from, you can get lost in the data, but responses from other agencies to Simsbury were 387, 1 out of every 6 calls. That exceeds SAA responses to other towns, 237 by 150. This is the indicator of a higher staffing need here. 2 ambulances balances the in and out mutual aid calls, so the data does support it. The key is to reduce the need for mutual aid, as some of you said. The average mutual aid response time is 13 to 16 and a half minutes, versus Simsbury Ambulance gets there in 7.5 to 9 minutes. Dramatically different. The town is on the hook whether we have hands-off or hands-on with the 501c3. That's in the law that the town attorney stated. He said the town oversees the provisions of EMS. We need to take a hard look at the contracted response time. As Eric mentioned, 15% of the combined SAA and mutual aid calls take more than 14 minutes. The mutual aid agreements are also outdated and should be revised. Regarding tonight's presentation, SAA has grown to meet the need. I would argue not so much. It seems that they have definitely shrunk over the past decade. They also said 2016, Simsbury Ambulance added a 3rd ambulance to our fleet to ensure the continuity of the 2-ambulance system. But Simsbury Ambulance has not ever guaranteed a 2-ambulance system, not even during the daytime. The 2nd ambulance was actually staffed 10 years before 2016, so I think that was a mistake in the presentation. A lot was attributed to decline of volunteerism and COVID. Those aren't the reasons that we've heard from the people with over 100 years experience, as evidenced by the fact that this decline began around 2013, accelerated the town around 2016, well before COVID. Decline of volunteerism should not be accepted at face value, and certainly doesn't explain the enormous drop in Simsbury volunteers over the past several years. Suffield, population 16,000, states on their site that they have 90 volunteers. The experienced hands point to a deterioration of morale here, and before that there was never a problem consistently staffing 2 ambulances, and calls for mutual aid were much less. We're talking about the 2013 to 2016 period, or even before that. There's opportunity and need for oversight here. It should also be clear by now that the medical capability of police response is extremely limited. They are not EMTs. This is being repeatedly overstated. It's not fair to the officers who are not even EMTs to be thrown into the mix like that.
30 seconds.
SVA is committed to and has been staffing a second ambulance 7 days a week. So can we get this in a new contract? Because this was immediately followed by a lot of hedging. We're trying, at times we're unable to, unforeseen circumstances. I can't see that many unforeseen circumstances at all, day to day. Little East Windsor, population 11,000, has 2 ambulances on all day and a third during the daytime. They have less than half our population. One more paragraph. There seems to be resistance to growing with the town. If SAA can contractually commit without the major caveats that they make, then there is opportunity to work together, but there needs to be a written commitment. Otherwise, RFPs are just good government. I recently found a copy of a real Connecticut bid from an EMS provider that offered versus resisted written, contracted performance standards and formal coordination and oversight.
Okay, Carl.
Half the paragraph. The response tends to be, well, we're not resisting, or we haven't felt resistance from SAA. Well, ask them again for a regular board seat. Ask them for a contractual commitment for a second ambulance. And see if the answer is yes or a bunch of hedging. That's how we'll know, and that's how you'll know whether we're getting cooperation or resistance.
Thank you. I do appreciate it. I will hope that everybody will keep till their 5 minutes because it's not fair to everybody else in the room.
I'll be under.
Thank you.
I promise. Christine Traficante, 21 North Drive. So real quick, I want to touch on what Carl said, and I think that Sean mentioned during the meeting, that when you do call 911, a trained professional goes to your home, that's the police department, but that's very misleading, because when the police get there, there's only a few things that they can really do. And so many times you'll have an emergency situation, and like in mine, they showed up and they were quick, and that's great, and I love the police, they're awesome, I think we should get more of them, I know they're going to put in a request for that. But when they get there, they just kind of stand there, because there's not a lot they can do according to their policy. So, talking about the ambulance as well, we all have people we love and care about, and when that person needs assistance, waiting 32 minutes for an ambulance to arrive is an exorbitant amount of time to wait. This isn't an if situation, it happened to me. And I feel like I've been pulling teeth trying to get that to be changed. So imagine it, your husband, your wife, your kid, they're hurt, you're in a desperate situation, you've called 911, and 32 minutes has gone by. Panic starts to set in. I think it's completely wrong to come in from a position of opposing an additional ambulance. Why would you oppose something that's going to help the people of this town? Sorry, I brought the wrong glasses, so I can't see. So as Simsbury Ambulance sat here and said, they have the equipment, they have the people, they have the money, the town has the need. I can't understand why we wouldn't make the necessary adjustments to meet the need, whether it's a potential need or, like mine, an existing true need. So I encourage everyone to take this on themselves, because like I said, we all have people who could be in that situation, and we want that help to come sooner than the 32 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna let Joan go. Yeah, just because she raised her hand first. I am gonna, we'll move her on in front of that.
Joan Cole, 26 Whitcomb Drive. On January 27, 2022, the Board of Selectmen meeting on goal setting discussed a wide variety of subjects. The meeting can be viewed on SCTV and YouTube. First Selectman Wendy Massachusetts was concerned about allegations of low morale and employees in town hall, a retention problem and a hiring problem under the leadership of Town Manager Maria Capriola. The first indication of poor performance of Town Manager Maria Capriola was in a Hartford Current article, Abuse of Power, describing the removal of a highly qualified employee in the planning department. Selectman Sean Askham has been cheerleader for Town Manager Maria Capriola throughout all the management issues, and acknowledged that Town Manager Maria Capriola was unethical in asking staff to change the job performance evaluation from excellent to poor and all other issues affecting town employees. Behind closed doors, the Board of Selectmen have known that Town Manager Maria Capriola's leadership skills were below expectations but voted publicly for the approval of her job performance. Truth-telling is not politically correct. The only person in Maria's leadership team that responded to a survey on her job performance was Tom Taberski, Recreation Director, responding with a glowing report. No other employees responded. Recently, I filed a Freedom of Information request for all communications between Sean Asco and Town Manager Maria Capriola from 2019 to the present. I've received several emails from Melissa Appleby, Deputy Town Manager, stating that my request will be denied because it is too burdensome and broad. According to Freedom of Information Act, burdensome is not disqualification for information. The database was searched and counted 1,545 emails. Text messages should also be downloaded. It appears that the number of communications from Town Manager Maria Capriola and the response from Selectman Sean Askham is burdensome and excessive to an elected official with a full-time job. I was told to allow an extended time for town staff to review the correspondence, which I did. I have since amended my request in the spirit of cooperation to reduce the search to texts, emails, and all other correspondence, excluding CCs to the Board of Selectmen, all correspondence directly attributed to Sean
Recording
Askham.
in progress.
Town Manager Maria Capriola should be fulfilled in a timely manner. Presently, I have 7 unfulfilled Freedom of Information requests. Town Manager Maria Capriola has an employment contract approved by the Board of Selectmen. If a majority of the Board of Selectmen is dissatisfied with her leadership, the contract does not have to be renewed. Another option is to have a yearly contract. There is a posting on the internet, quote, "Your organization does not have a recruitment problem. It is a retention problem caused by a leadership problem," end quote. This exemplifies the management style of Town Manager Maria Capriola. At the Board of Selectmen meeting on January 12, 2022, there was a resident who came forward describing understaffed volunteer staff, leading to lengthy responses from the Simsbury Volunteer Ambulance Service. Staffing has become a public safety issue with reliance on a minimal staff. The Board of Selectmen invited Simsbury Volunteer Ambulance to make a presentation. The Board of Selectmen should have a representative from AMR come before the board to discuss their business and action plan and requirements for state approval to transfer the ambulance service to Simsbury. AMR website states, quote, "American Medical Response, AMR, Greater Hartford, Northeast Connecticut, provides emergency and non-emergency medical transportation service for Central and North Central. Founded in 1997 with decades of experience with our predecessor companies. We have grown to employ a diverse workforce of more than 200 paramedics and EMTs who respond to an average of 50,000 emergency calls annually. We pride ourselves in the strong relationship we have built in our communities with our healthcare systems. AMR has proven itself to be an industry leader, proving top quality care to our patients, exemplary service to our customers, and for maintaining high industry standards. As a result, many healthcare institutions have partnered with AMR, Hartford Northeast," end quote. Avon and other towns have been using AMR ambulance service for years with immediate response time with paid staff on call 24/7 without any complaints. The Simsbury ambulance is a service that has been unresponsive to community needs. Karen Stewart, Executive Director, receives a salary of $123,920 according to their 2020 990 tax filing. AMR requires the town to provide a building. All other expenses are responsibility of AMR. Chief Bolter has a list of 6 officers to promote to sergeant since February 2021. Officers Dunn, Russell, Morano, Cushman, Ball, Barrett. There is no detective sergeant in the police department. When is Chief Bolter going to announce more promotions? All my comments will be posted on Simsbury Cat, Twitter at Junco, and Facebook. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Jack, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Jacqueline Crockett. I live on 9 Stebbinsbrook Lane in the Pine Hill neighborhood, and I'm also on the board of the Pine Hill Homeowners Association. I last appealed to you all on January 24th and requested that a portion of the ARPA funding awarded to the residents of Simsbury be used to save our neighborhood from a sewer system disaster. I'm here again this evening because I have read the report provided to the Board of Selectmen by the Director of Public Works, Tom Roy, regarding the history and issues concerning our sewer system, and I'd like to address parts of that report now. In the section under the header Town Efforts in 2003, Tom notes that the former Director of Public Works and the former Superintendent of the WPCA met with representatives from the Pine Hill Homeowners Association and proposed a plan to replace portions of the sewer collection system. I was not living in Pine Hill at the time, but my understanding from speaking with neighbors who were is that the HOA board did not choose to replace the sewer system at the time because the issues were not as well known and not as urgent. The board instead took a Band-Aid approach to address those portions of the sewer that the town had proposed to be replaced and began to build up the HOA reserves to offset the costs of replacing the sewer system in the future. Fast forward to the financial crisis of 2008, where the HOA board made the tough decision to use those reserve funds that had been earmarked for the sewer system replacement to instead offset the costs of regular HOA dues in order to ease the financial burdens on its residents during the years of the recession. Since that time, the HOA has continued the Band-Aid approach with the sewers, and here we are today. Later in the report, Tom states that the HOA board contacted the town again in 2015 about the need for replacing the sewers. The HOA board was informed that the town would not provide any financial assistance, but they could provide options for the residents to pay and finance the work themselves. The Pine Hill residents met again with Tom Roy on November 3rd of 2021, and the HOA board has been making every effort to convey that the sewer replacement project is now of the utmost urgency. The HOA board also continues to explore the types of funding that we may qualify for in order to provide any relief from this additional financial burden in what is already a time of hardship for so many of our residents due to the nature of the COVID-19 pandemic. Tom states in his report that our sewer project must meet the requirements of the EPS Clean Water State Revolving Fund, and that our HOA must have taxing authority to qualify. I believe this is wrong. That is a CWSRF eligibility requirement and not an ARPA requirement. The Department of the Treasury has issued the interim final rule for ARPA and only recommends the alignment of projects funded by ARPA with the types of projects that are eligible to receive financial assistance through the CWSRF. However, ARPA is not limited to those types of projects or subject to those eligibility requirements. The Treasury specifically states that the interim final rule is intended to provide flexibility for municipalities to direct the funding to their community's own particular needs and priorities and would not preclude recipients from applying their own project criteria. The interim final rule is what allows for private sewers to even be eligible, and that eligibility stands regardless of whether the private system is owned by an HOA with taxing authority. Not only is our project eligible, but it is precisely the kind of project the American Relief Plan Act is supposed to fund. ARPA is about relief made necessary by the hardships of COVID. Pine Hill Sewer Project is an urgent matter of public health and environmental safety. Residents have already experienced basements filled with sewage, and such occurrences will only increase in frequency as time goes on. The residents of Pine Hill are not wealthy. Most of us are living on modest or fixed incomes, and we are confronting the sewer problem while we are struggling through a global pandemic. Which brings me to my final points. In response to our request for ARPA funds, the issue of fairness has been raised. There have been previous projects like Pine Hills that were not federally funded. And certainly if there are other Simsbury communities presently dealing with similar problems, we in Pine Hill would support their receiving similar aid provided they are willing to rally their community around the issue as we have. But past projects are irrelevant here for two reasons. The first is simply that all one-time emergency funding like ARPA is unfair in a sense. For every single project ARPA will fund, there will be a similar project from the past that was not federally funded. Not because it is unworthy, but because no such funding was available then. But in another sense, the issue of fairness should not arise at all, because our project is quite unlike any that has come before it. It is not by luck or chance that ARPA funds are available now. They are available now because our country is in need of relief now. Yes, there have been other sewer projects in Simsbury, and those projects were not given federal funding, but neither did they occur during conditions of economic hardship wrought by a global pandemic. The residents of Pine Hill,
5 seconds, Jackie.
still struggling through the effects of the pandemic, are facing the collapse of their sewer system. We are asking for a small portion of the funding made available to Simsbury to help save our neighborhood from a disaster.
Thank you. One thing I would like to ask before, if somebody, how many people are here from Pine Hill? Or do we have people that are not from Pine Hill so that we can at least listen to any sort of different problem? Well, now this is Bob Petroselli. So we've also heard from Bob Petroselli too. So I guess does everybody, what's our time limit on? Okay, so can we limit it to 3 minutes each person?
Not necessarily. We're not all speaking. Yeah, we're not all speaking.
Oh, okay, who's speaking?
Dan.
Okay.
But thank you for coming out and showing support.
No, you're welcome.
I want to laud my wonderful neighbors at Pine Hill for showing up with short notice. Very, very important topic here. Good evening. My name is Daniel Diodato. I live at 12 Middle Lane in Simsbury. I have been a resident here for 20 years. My reason for speaking this evening is to garner support from the Board of Selectmen regarding distribution of funding from the American Rescue Plan for the replacement of our aging and deteriorated sewer system, as well as the refurbishment of our roads. According to recently published articles pertaining to the ARPA monies, ARPA, etc., monies can be used for privately owned infrastructure. We are aware of the difficulties of determining the distribution of funding. I would like to provide justification as to why we are eligible for funding, why this request is paramount, and why this undertaking would benefit the town of Simsbury. Please consider the following. The Pine Hill community is of historic value. I will throw these up here, and hopefully you know about the town of Simsbury, and we're in it. The homes are modest, affordable, and desirable. Its annual tax revenue is significant. As a PUD, we assume other financial costs that would be of burden to the town. The community is diverse. The community serves as an example for future affordable housing in Simsbury, which is needed. What will become of our community if allocations and other provisions are not granted? Environmental catastrophes will be imminent and would affect 39 dwellings, and the land could be contaminated. Availability of clean water. Residents will be without shelter. The town will receive negative publicity via the media. Tax revenue would cease. It would have an adverse effect on the school environment. We realize that we are only one of 37 privately owned communities in the town. However, I ask you to seriously consider the purpose and the timeliness of the American Rescue Plan and its significance. Please set aside any worries and potential ramifications from others. Thank you for your support, and I truly plead with you to consider this urgent need for your community.
Thank you. Oh, okay. Hi.
Hi, I'm Paul Peterson from 11 Stebbins, Brooklyn. My wife Dawn is here as well. I live in the Pine Hill neighborhood. I'm also on the board, a member of the board there. In October, it might have been September, I was approached by Wendy, who is talking to some people in the neighborhood about her campaign. And she approached me and she wanted to see my wife because she was on her list of people to talk to. She asked me how things were going in the neighborhood, and I told her that we were an HOA, we were having issues with our sewer system, and we, and we needed some help. And she proceeded to tell me that the town was going to receive some funds from the federal government, around $7.5 million. And she said, you might be able to get some help from that. So, so I, we passed the word around to our neighbors, and that's, I think, kind of how the ARPA conversation began here. And so we've done some research, and I think the ARP funding would fit our community. I think we would qualify for these funds, and And they're federal funds, they're not from the town. And the town has spent a lot of money trying to preserve historic areas. And I think our neighborhood is definitely a historic area in town. Our homes were built in the early 1900s, and I think we all do a nice job of keeping them in good condition and whatnot. There are many residents in Simsbury who have made Pine Hill their first home, and also residents have decided to retire here. Many of our neighbors are on fixed incomes or have moved here to start families. And during this difficult time of COVID and inflation, it is a critical issue, you know. And the sewer assessment at this time would be very difficult for most of us in the neighborhood. And I think this is what these funds are for, our kind of situation. So I hope you can have your support. Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to say this is on our agenda for the end of the meeting in our communication section, and we have Tom Roy and Tony, I think, on standby. Is it Tony? Yeah. To kind of talk about the letter, and then we will have a discussion at that point in time. I just wanted you to know that will be later in the meeting.
This will be short and sweet.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for listening to us this evening. My name is Mike Gannis. I live at 9 Middle Lane. I'm also on the board of the Pine Hill Homeowners Association. And I'm not even going to try to follow Jackie's act. Thank you, Jackie. But I have two things to bring up that I'd like for you to consider that has not been mentioned before. Our meeting with the WPCA in November started a lot of discussion among town officials, discussion among ourselves, discussion among people who just know that there was a discussion. And you know, everyone has to discuss. And I started to get really kind of upset because I thought I was hearing on more than one occasion, and please don't ask me to name names, but it almost sounded like we were being blamed for coming to you for your money. I'll get to that point in a second. Because when we bought into Pine Hill Homeowners Association, we somehow should have known that when Ensign Bickford, in anticipation of signing that development over to us in the 1970s, did knowingly, against industry standards of the time, install a sewer system they knew we were going to be responsible for, that not only wouldn't meet the standards back then, but it was probably engineering malfeasance. And we are now paying the price for that. We cannot or should not be held to account for not knowing that this beautiful neighborhood, where we thought the biggest problem was pine trees and sap on our cars, little did we know that what we were buying into was a future environmental disaster that will affect the town, not just us. The second point I want to bring up is this. We are not standing here asking you to give us some of your money. The money that we are asking for is money we sent to Washington, D.C. in our tax dollars. And Washington, D.C. decided that at this time in our country's history, they would allocate certain money that what we're asking for qualifies for. So at the risk of sounding like a glutton, I want to look each of you in the eye and say, please give us some of our money back.
Yes.
Please give us some of our money back. We sent it there. It's not yours, it's ours. That said, I want to acknowledge that we all understand there are many needs in this town. And you're in a difficult position of trying to allocate money that's of limited source to many people. And we respect your position and the difficulty that that places on you. But I think it's safe to say at this point, and then I will say thank you and good night, we are kind of living in fear. Many of us viewed our ability to move to Simsbury as having arrived in the land of milk and honey. I've personally been here since 1973 because I wanted my children to get that kind of education. It's not the land of milk and honey. It's an environmental disaster waiting to happen because one of the major contributors to your tax base and one of the major political powers in this town knowingly built a defective sewer system in the 1970s and then turned it over to us, telling us we were responsible. You've got to help us out of this. If we could do it ourselves, we would. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Anybody else from Pine Hill that would like to speak? Okay, do we have any more public audience here? Do we have Bob Patricelli?
Who's going to hand these down? Patricelli, I live at 77 Hartford Road. I am the owner of the Folly Farm, and I've lived in town since 1971. And I'm here to speak to the issue of the state police fire range. But before I do that, I just want to, in an aside, say that this is the second meeting in which I've heard the pleas of the people from the Pine Hill Association, and I want to associate myself with your case. I think not only should you get ARPA money, but you should get a little more of your share of Simsbury money.
Thank you. Thank you.
So my purposes tonight are twofold. I would like to bring the Board of Selectmen up to date on what's going on with the issues around the state police firing range, and secondly, to comment on the proposed letter that is pending before you. On the first subject, in talking to a few of you, I've heard it said that, well, we're not hearing from people about the firing range. And is this an issue where we should be involved? Well, I think you're not hearing from people because they don't know about it. The state has kept this under wraps and announced it without any public hearings and notice back in August. And nobody knows that they're about to spend $11 million to rebuild a lousy firing range on stilts in a floodplain next to a public water supply in a residential community. How crazy is that? So, nevertheless, the point is well made. If you're not hearing from people, then we got to get the word out. So, this brochure, and I'll leave a bunch behind, is being mailed tomorrow to 2,100 residents and businesses of Simsbury and Avon in the postal routes that hear the noise, especially. And it makes the case for why the range should be moved. A website called Relocate the Range will come up on Wednesday with a lot of facts, and people will be able to go to that website, press a button, and send an email opposing the rebuilding the range in Simsbury to 13 legislative leaders, including our board chairman, Wendy, so she can track what's going on. So stay tuned. You're going to hear a lot more. Now, what's your role in this? Honestly, if I may suggest, your role should be advocacy. We're not asking you for any money, but we're asking you for protection as our elected representatives. And this is a travesty. Yeah, it's been here for a long time, but the town has changed. If you look at this map, and there's a photo of the range last year flooded, you can see how the town has changed around the range. You authorized 135 new apartments about 1,500 feet away across the river. The Aquarian Company has a pumping station pumps public water to those new apartments that is 50 yards from the lead deposits of the firing range. You are complicit in the problems that have been created. And we all need to, we're tempting fate. We're tempting fate on lead pollution, on ricochets, it shouldn't be here. Now, the state police need a great training facility, but it should be an indoor, noise-insulated training facility built on state property somewhere, plenty of sites, and it would do a much better job. If I may
45 seconds, Bob.
respectfully suggest, your letter does a good job, I believe, in the first several paragraphs, but I thought the problems section needed to be strengthened. Again, respectfully, you might want to look at the 9 problems that are cited on the back of this. And it suggests that because we are not informed of hours of operation, making it difficult for Simsbury residents to know when to expect noise to be emanating. That's not the problem. The problem isn't not knowing when it's coming. The fact is it's coming all the time, 7 days a week and on weekends at night. So please strengthen the letter, and I don't know if you need me to stay around for the rest of the meeting, but I'd be happy to if that would be. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to leave some copies of this brochure. I hope everybody will become advocates.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is everybody else all set for public audience here? Okay, thank you for coming out. We're going to move to representation. The letter is also at the end of our agenda, which we will discuss and decide how we're going to mail it and send it. For now, we have a presentation from Maria on the Council of Costs, Council of Small Towns, with a legislative update that she's going to present to all of us.
You're welcome to all stay, but it's not the most
Betsy Garda.
exciting. Not the most exciting meeting, Sarah. Just want to tell you guys that.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
I don't need to. Although he's not there. Wait, did you say Tom Roy was gonna come out here later?
He will be online when we discuss the letter, because he's going to present his data to us.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming tonight. For your clear presentation. Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Hey, good evening, thank you.
Yeah. Here.
All right. As we're heading into the 2022 legislative session, we thought it would be helpful to have Betsy Guerra, who is the Executive Director of the Council of Small Towns, come back out for a visit with us and flag some potential legislation that may be of interest to our community. You may recall Betsy joined us actually right before the pandemic, I think was her last visit, and had done a similar update, which I know that board members found to be very helpful at that time. I really want to thank Betsy for her time this evening, and again for flagging some potential legislative issues that may be of interest to us. I would also just say that, following that presentation and discussion, if there are any issues that you feel very strongly about, whether in support of or potentially against, we can certainly assist in preparing some draft communication for you all in that regard. We've also attached for you this evening costs legislative priorities for 2022 as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Betsy. And Betsy, thank you for your patience this evening.
All right, thank you. Good evening. I'm actually having hold on a sec. I had 2 laptops going. One because the audio wasn't working. Let me turn that one off. So thank you for having me here today. I do want to just touch on the budget and some legislative issues that may be coming up this session of interest to the town of Simsbury. As you know, Governor Lamont presented his biennial budget for fiscal year 23. It's actually the second year of the biennial, so it just includes some revisions to what was adopted last session, which is an almost $24 billion budget. And the budget represents a 2% increase over last year. Let me know if you can hear me all right, because I'm getting a little feedback on the audio myself.
Thank you.
As you can probably see, the funding for municipal aid has been fairly flat funded, which is good news. It wasn't too long ago that we had been looking at some reductions in municipal aid and even some mid-year cuts because of the daunting budget deficit that the state faced. This year's budget includes $2.85 billion in statutory formula grants. So those grants, such as the Town Aid Road, the Local Capital Improvement Program grant, the Pequot Mohegan grants, municipal grants and aid, pilot funding, is all flat funded. There is about a $40 million increase in education cost sharing formula. Proposed budget continues to phase in the changes to the ECS formula. You can see that Simsbury has a somewhat adjusted amount that they should be receiving under ECS. Can you hear me, or?
Oh, we can hear you. We can hear you fine.
Getting some feedback on this. So, in addition to the changes to the increase for the ECS funding, there's also about $90 million for to help towns address the need to upgrade HVAC facilities in their schools. And so that was something that Cost had recommended, because we had a number of schools that, particularly during the pandemic, realized that they were facing some significant indoor air quality issues. And unfortunately, initially, the Department of Administrative Services had indicated that those costs were not eligible under the school construction grant program. So I think that was a big win, and we do expect that to move through the legislature. Special education was a big topic of discussion at our town meeting. There may be some efforts to address special education. Governor Lamont's budget actually level funds special education costs, but there, again, the legislative leaders are looking at ways of trying to address some of the unpredictable nature of those costs, particularly with the way that they impact the minimum budget requirements. So we'll hear more about that. The one big issue in the budget that, although we understand why they're doing this, is the car tax cap. And as you probably heard, there's a proposal from Governor Lamont to cap the car tax, which is currently at 45 mils, to 29 mils, which would impact a town with Simsbury's mill rate. Under the proposal, Governor Lamont is hoping to make towns whole by creating this municipal reimbursement program for motor vehicle taxes. Unfortunately, we've had a few towns run the numbers and they don't match up. I think they're using, or not using the supplemental motor vehicle list that comes out. And so there are some problems with that. In addition to Governor Lamont's proposal, there's several bills already introduced by Senate Democratic leadership that would also cap car taxes, but change the way that the towns would be reimbursed. So initially they would be reimbursed an 80% level, and that would be phased down to the point where eventually there would be no additional reimbursement, that those costs would shift to homeowners and businesses in the community. And that's our fears, that it's about $1 billion in revenue that is generated from car tax. And to the extent that you remove that, all you're doing is shifting those costs to others. And is that really fair for homeowners and businesses? So we're looking at that. We're keeping an open mind. We're meeting with OPM to talk about that. There's also a proposal to change the way that motor vehicles are assessed and change the way that reporting is done under the supplemental lists. Again, we have some issues with that. Another big issue that you're going to hear a lot.
Can we jump in on that one? We can't let that one go. We've seen that car accident before. They've already failed at this, 5 years ago? And I know Senator Looney is dying to get his tax change in, but this is bad policy. It was bad policy the first time, and it's worse the second time. Because with all due respect to Lamont, hope is not a funding strategy, right? And at the end of the day, your point is right on in that the state has a push for affordable housing, yet they're going to shift the tax burden to homeowners. And that's contrary to the drive at the state level of helping make homeownership more affordable in this state. It's a ridiculous fool's errand once again, and it punishes municipalities, not just Simsbury. So I think we need to stand up against that one. We've seen how this ends.
I thought we were talking about motor vehicles first.
But you still have to collect the dollars.
Right, I know that.
So therefore, we have to raise the mill rate on homes because we are not able to collect the money on cars.
If they don't make us whole.
And they won't make us whole. They didn't when they tried this before. They screwed this up already.
Okay.
And they had to take it away.
Right now, I hear you. I've heard that they're going to make us whole.
They're
I
not
don't know
going
if they're going to make us whole forever, right?
You
I
notice
think
the
that's
word
what
hope.
Betsy's saying.
But the governor hopes. That means he's not
No,
going to.
I agree.
This is, we've seen this movie before.
Making them.
Yeah, and Betsy, I'll just jump in quickly. Hi, it's Maria. Betsy, I think that's one of the concerns that I share as well is just sort of based on past experience, particularly when the state is having financial challenges, is that we see the aid to municipalities cut, whether, a good example is after the 2008 financial crisis, about 1 month into fiscal year 09-10, they notified pilot communities, oh, by the way, you're actually not getting what we told you. My former community was, oh, by the way, you're not getting $2 million and you're 1 month into the fiscal year. Another example would be the municipal revenue sharing account, which was supposed to be in part the solution to this car tax proposal previously. If any of us ever saw a payment, that's if we saw it one time and it was for a very small amount. And so that is a bit of a concern, is that those are just a few examples of many, is that when we're promised a revenue source from the state to replace another revenue source, is it doesn't often come, or if it comes, it's at a much lower amount, or maybe you get it one time and then you don't see it again. So, just in terms of the stability of that revenue source moving forward, I am concerned about that.
Sorry, Betsy, I
Right.
couldn't let that one go.
And I would agree. The state does not have at all a good track record in keeping their promises to reimburse municipalities. And we've seen it with pilot, we've seen it with special education costs. So it's a longstanding problem, and there's really no way to create a fail-safe mechanism for protecting those funds. But it will be a topic of conversation, so I think that's one that we would definitely need our towns to weigh in on. As I mentioned, another big issue that towns are facing is solid waste management. And as you know, since they've changed the policy in China and are not accepting our recyclables, towns are now seeing recyclables as a cost as opposed to a revenue generator. And so there are proposals underway that would enhance opportunities to move to glass-only recycling, organics collection, extended producer responsibility. And those are all good initiatives, and COST has been very supportive of these efforts in general. There's some that we haven't had an opportunity to discuss, like the extended producer responsibility on packaging. I just had a call from Deep earlier today that they want us to set up a meeting on that. Problem is, however, is that all of these initiatives, while hopefully effective, aren't going to help us get over that hump when MIRA closes in July 2022. So we do have a meeting with the Environment Committee chairs next week, or actually tomorrow, that went by fast, tomorrow, to discuss opportunities to keep MIRA viable until some of these other solutions can start to produce results. I know that Governor Lamont at our town meeting had mentioned that he does not have any money in his budget to upgrade the MIRA facility, and he doesn't think that's really Connecticut's future, that he's concerned about some environmental justice issues and whether that facility should be in Hartford. And so it's going to be a hard push to get them to try to address something to keep MIRA open in the short term at a minimum, so we can address some of these solid waste issues. There are a lot of bills I mentioned that are going to be heard in the Environment Committee, so if you're interested, certainly pay attention to those. There is, I know COST has supported an effort to mandate that there's pay-as-you-throw or unit-based pricing, which to eliminate the amount of solid waste that is generated. There is not support for that in the General Assembly. The budget does include a pot of funding for towns that are interested in launching programs like pay as you throw, extended producer responsibility for tires or smoke detectors, and organics collection. So there will be some funding, but it's going to be pretty much startup funding, I believe. Another issue that we're hearing a lot about, I don't know if this is necessarily an issue in Simsbury, is broadband. So there's a lot of effort, there's funding under the American Rescue Plan Act, as well as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that Governor Lamont is targeting to broadband. And in his budget proposal, he did support using some of that funding to work with the Connecticut Education Network, which already has fiber broadband connected to schools and libraries and public safety facilities, and to use that as sort of the middle mile. So don't reinvent the wheel. Let's leverage that funding to make sure that we can move forward with broadband. So there seems to be a lot in that area, and I think we're going to see a discussion about that. Juvenile crime, there's certainly going to be a lot of discussion about efforts to address what appears to be a rising incidence in juvenile crime. And so I had listed a number of different recommendations that the governor's proposal includes. And some of those are common sense things, looking at the hold times, making sure that police officers share information on who has been detained, so that these repeat offenders, you hear those stories about the kids getting arrested for stealing a car, and then 3 hours later they're back on the street and stealing another car. So trying to address those problems in the system, but also addressing some mental health issues, behavioral issues, looking at electronic monitoring for people that are arrested for auto theft, who've already been adjudicated previously for such theft. So I'm sure the Judiciary Committee and the Public Safety Committee will also be raising bills with regard to that. Opioid abuse continues to be an issue that the state is interested in enhancing efforts to address. The Public Health Committee raised a bill today to look at opioid abuse and making sure that funding is for those kind of treatment programs that have been evidence-based, that have worked, and trying to get that money into the community to help people address opioid abuse locally. Mental health, again, the Public Health Committee raised a comprehensive bill on mental health this morning. I don't know at this point what's in it. I know the governor's budget does include money for new behavioral health services. There's some talk, I know, about the federal infrastructure funding, and that there is a match requirement. The proposed budget includes $75 million as the state match, and they're also going to try to provide some funding to assist municipalities in meeting their match requirements. So we're going to hear more about, with the federal infrastructure funding under the bipartisan infrastructure law. Although the law itself is passed, the appropriations haven't, and so people kind of assume that there's money out there. It's not out there yet. It hasn't been appropriated by Congress. We're hoping to have more information about the water and wastewater infrastructure funding availability probably next week or two from EPA to understand how that money's going to flow through Connecticut. So I also mentioned, I know this is an issue that the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection has included in its legislative package an effort to ban on a statewide basis the feeding of wild animals, coyotes, bears, and foxes, and so forth. I know that Simsbury has an ordinance to prohibit the intentional feeding of these types of animals, but DEEP recognizes that this is an issue that really needs a statewide approach, and so COST will be supporting that recommendation coming up. So I don't know if you have any questions on any of these issues. I'm going to run through them pretty quickly.
Yeah, Betsy, it's Maria again. I also just want to thank you for bringing up that potential statewide legislation regarding the prohibition of intentionally feeding wildlife. Some of you may recall, and for our new members, just a little bit of background, but there are many states, particularly in the Northeast, that have statewide legislation that prohibits the intentional feeding of wildlife. Unfortunately, Connecticut doesn't have that. And so after, a lot of meetings with DEEP, pleading with state officials, we realized a few years back that the likelihood of that happening in the near term was probably unlikely. So I think that our work group of the Board of Selectmen put together really good, solid policy in that regard. And in absence of the statewide legislation, since we adopted our ordinance, the towns of Granby, East Granby, and Farmington used our ordinance as a model ordinance. And while they had slight variations to our ordinance, they did, share that they used our ordinance as a model ordinance. And then Barkhamsted had also adopted one quite similar to ours around the same time as us. So at least as a region, I think that, as Betsy indicated, this is a problem that is affecting our region. And hopefully, if this moves forward, we'll have some statewide legislation as opposed to trying to do a piecemeal approach town by town.
Go ahead.
No, you can
go ahead. Oh, okay. Betsy, I heard this on CCM. I just wanted to hear, because you're up on all the Lamont stuff. When they were talking about the motor vehicle, 29%, right? The 29 mil cap. And they were also saying, a lot of towns have seen increased grand list because it's based on the value of the cars, and cars' values have gone up. And something that everybody seemed to not be thrilled about was that he has a potential proposal, I don't know what and where it is, that they would change that calculation to using the sticker price and then depreciation, which would result in less revenue coming in. So I just want to know if you had caught on to that.
Right, so that is a separate bill.
Right.
And that is going to be before the Planning and Development Committee. It may be up for a hearing fairly soon, just given the timeline. So we actually having a joint meeting with CCM. I haven't sent it out to our board yet, but with OPM to talk about that proposal. We're inviting the towns to include either their assessor or their finance director so that we can get some input into how that would really play out.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I mean, the overall challenge in this space is we have so few ways to raise revenue as a municipality.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't want to tax people. I don't enjoy it. It's one of the things I hate about this role. However, we have to pay for services somehow. And if you eliminate yet another or squeeze another means of how all we're doing is redistributing to an even smaller group and taking away that flexibility, it's just, it is not intelligent policy. Is the problem.
Well, I would agree with that. When this came up a few years ago, we actually had some towns analyze who would be impacted, like who would benefit from this, assuming that if you were renting, that your rent would go up to cover the increased cost of property taxes you were absorbing because there was no longer a car tax. And it really was a fraction of the people. And those were people that owned cars that were living at home with their parents and not paying the property taxes themselves on the homes or the rent. So, I don't think anyone likes the car tax. I get that it's a concern because you pay one tax in one town for the same car that you in a different tax in another town. So I get that, but I think in small towns in particular, we've had a very high collection rate for motor vehicle taxes. Doesn't seem to be a burden for small towns to collect that tax. And unless there's a way to really, as you say, diversify the local revenues and ensure that we have some other way of generating those revenues, it just seems short-sighted.
I agree, Betsy. Well said.
Especially if as we continue to load this town with high-density housing, which means those are non-property owners and those are renters whose taxes on their car bills are going down, yet the extraction that they may be pulling from the town from the services, from education, certainly an imbalance that is something that our dynamic, it doesn't address our dynamic directly. So,
Amber?
Right.
I have a question about housing funding. We have a housing authority here in Simsbury, and part of the issue that they're facing is that the renters assistance program has been flat funded by the state. And so if you have qualified for this RAP funding, you can still get it. But if you are an individual that needs to get qualified, you're not able to because the program isn't accepting new people. And it has caused some problems, with our residents that are not able to get qualified. It makes it difficult for our housing authority to be able to rent some of their units because they can't get people qualified. And do you know anything about whether this renters assistance program funding is going to be funded, more adequately again by the state, or?
I haven't heard that. No, I couldn't quite hear the name of the funding.
It's called the Renters Assistance Program, or
okay.
RAP, RAP funding.
There is some funding in the budget for housing programs. I haven't, I'll have to look more closely to see if that's in there, but that's not something I've heard about. The Appropriations Committee is already beginning to hold public hearings on the budget. So I can send Maria a link to the public hearing, because I did get an alert from some of the housing groups about calling for some increased funding for various housing programs. So that may be something you want to comment on. I had just started to look at that.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
And I will say the session concludes May 4th. It's one of the shortest sessions that they could possibly have based on the constitutional requirements. So we're already down 1 week, so 11 weeks to go. So if there are issues, and I know in talking to the various chairs, they really want to focus their agendas on critical issues and not get bogged down with hundreds and hundreds of bills, but ones that they can get across the finish line. One of the issues I should mention, because I just talked to the Planning and Development Committee here, is extending the authority of municipalities to hold hybrid or remote meetings of the boards and commissions. And so there's always a lot of moving parts to those kinds of things. And currently that authority expires April 30th. So they want to get that done sooner rather than later so that towns can continue to hold them format.
Thank you for that. I mean, it seems to me it's 2022 and I can't believe that we wouldn't be able to do that. But I know that it's benefited many of our residents who didn't want to, or weren't able to make the trip to town hall.
Right. Right. So, well, thank you for having me. I'm always available for questions. So please either email me at bgara@ctcost.org. That's bgara@ctcost.org. Happy to respond to any issues you have.
Thanks for coming, Betsy.
Thanks, Betsy. Keep up the good fight.
Thanks, Maria.
Thank you. You guys too. Thanks for what you do. Bye.
Take care.
Thank you. Okay, so now we can move on to the, like I love how it shows that no one's here. It's just, we're like, well, it's not face. Oh, there we go.
There we go. Sorry, our technology is just being a little
Technology's terrible.
touchy this evening.
Okay, so it's time for the first Selectmen's report that everybody's been waiting for. I want to wish everybody who does celebrate a happy Valentine's Day. I want to congratulate the fans of the Rams on their big win at Inglewood last night at SoFi Stadium. I do want to say my favorite ad was the Austin Powers throwback with Dr. Evil. I'm a big fan of the movies. And I did like the halftime show of 1990s hip hop artists, although Twitter said that it was geared to old people in their 30s and 40s. So I'm way over that. And I still liked it.
Best halftime show ever. Yep. You hit the mark.
That's okay.
So I want to also recognize that February is Black History Month and suggest that residents find a historical novel by a Black author that they may not have already read as a way to participate. And there are many suggestions online. I can't hardly remember the books that I've read, so that's the best way for you to go about that. I want to thank the SVAA for coming tonight for their presentation and all the data that was presented tonight, and also to Betsy, Gara, and Maria for providing the Council of Small Towns legislative update. The Board of Selectmen appreciates everybody that came out to the public hearing last meeting. We're working on a list of projects based on multiple sources, the town manager recommendations, there's current and future CNR and capital needs, board and commission requests, many that have already been prioritized as part of master plans, our Board of Selectmen goals, and beyond that. We're working through this and trying to outline our plan on how to proceed. Given that our budget season is basically here, because Maria will present her budget on 2/28, and the changes provided in the final rule, we're hoping that we can fund projects that qualify, of course, and have during the budget process, because we can build consensus, on what we need and what has the highest need, and also do it with all Board of Selectmen members present and participating at that process. So it just seems like that may fall in line with the best way to do it. I won't go into that. I'll skip that. I think Maria has this in her report, but I'm not sure. But the grand list growth, a lot of the towns are seeing a lot based on the motor vehicle valuations. We saw a 3.7% increase. And this is data from Amy Merriweather, our finance director. The Lieutenant Governor, Susan Bysowitz, came out early this month where we all went to the groundbreaking for the new Iron Horse Inn. We want to thank Sarah for putting that together. I want to speak for the Board of Selectmen members who attended to say that we were very proud to dig with the gold painted shovels provided by the DPW. And this property is going to be 25 energy forward apartments that will bring people to the downtown area to be able to walk around. The Martin Luther King event that had been planned for March at First Church is now being moved to an SCTV recorded event due to the unexpected damage to their sanctuary. So stay tuned for that. And lastly, I want to give a shout out to Joey Coppinger, who at the Parks and Rec Commission meeting on 127 presented his Eagle Scout project. And it's called the Wood Duck Conservation Project. And it's a conservation project that will help with the wood duck population protect their ducklings. And he's providing for 6 big duck-sized bird structures that will be in water areas. And if you want to see what he did in his presentation, you can go watch the meeting. And that's my report for tonight.
Thank you, Wendy.
Yep. Thank you.
So just very quickly, our coronavirus update. We are seeing a decline in cases. I'm sure many of you are reading about that. We are seeing declines across the state. For the most recent reporting period, the decline wasn't as steep as it had been in the 2 weeks prior. But again, we are continuing to trend downwards, which is a good sign. I did also just want to share, we provided some updated links in the report here for folks who are seeking testing in the area. We've also provided a link for free COVID testing sites that are currently sponsored by the state that are available throughout the state. So again, those links are provided in the manager's report this evening. We are starting to see a decrease in the amount of COVID cases amongst our workforce. You may recall from December and January meetings that I had indicated that we were seeing the highest number of positive cases within our workforce throughout the pandemic. Again, that was largely transmission that occurred outside of the workplace. But we were in some of those non-emergency areas seeing some slightly delayed, response times for service and things of that nature. We are, again, starting to see some decreases for the month of February to date. So some good news there to report. Moving on to department news and notes, a few items from Culture, Parks, and Recreation. The summer program registration will be opening tomorrow, February 15th, online. So that is for programs such as Camp Stuff to Do, swim lessons, seasonal pool memberships, things of that nature. So we want to encourage folks to go on to simsburyrec.com to sign up for those programs. Some of you may have also seen the announcement that Simsbury Farms will be celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. It's such a wonderful community asset. That's a very big milestone. They are planning a number of community events for the anniversary. But as part of the celebration, we're hoping to do a display of photos of families enjoying their time at the farms over the years. So they are looking for photos from the 1970s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. If you have a family member who doesn't mind sharing a photo of your time there, we're asking folks to please email them to our rec supervisor, John Tebow. And we've included that contact information in the report. Also, just a quick announcement regarding public skating at the rink. We have scheduled some no school day afternoon public sessions for Monday, February 21st and Tuesday, February 22nd from 1 to 3 p.m. Admission is $5 for residents, and if you need a skate rental, that's $5 as well. A couple of quick items from engineering. Some of you may have noticed that the construction for the state-owned bridge on Route 10 over Hot Brook, it's right near the Ensign Bickford location. The rehabilitation of that bridge has begun. We did share some information about that recently on social media and through news and announcements. There will be one-way traffic from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday during points of construction on that project. And we are expecting that to continue through November 30th of 2022. As I mentioned again, that is a state-owned road and a state-owned bridge, so the State Department of Transportation is managing that project should anyone have concerns about it. And also from engineering, very big news. Our town engineer, Jeff Shea, has announced that he is retiring at the end of February. This is a particularly difficult announcement for me. I just can't say enough about the contributions and the positive contributions that Jeff has made for our community during his 8 years here. He has truly, through his project management, made a positive impact on this community for generations, and he will leave a legacy here for generations of our residents to enjoy. Some folks, I just highlighted, a few of his notable projects, but he was the project manager for our lovely addition, the Hot Brook Landing Park at the Flower Bridge. He was instrumental in the acquisition of Meadowood and has been helping us work on our restoration efforts for the barns. He ended up, due to a staff member at the Board of Ed who unexpectedly needed to take a retirement, he stepped in and provided some very important and critical project management for our Henry James Memorial School renovation project and saw that project to its end. He was critical in reviewing and analyzing materials related to the Deepwater Wind project, which is now Tobacco Valley Solar, to ensure that our interests were protected during that project. He assisted in the development of our town's water shortage ordinance. He served as a member of our internal traffic authority group, which works collaboratively to address traffic and vehicular, pedestrian, cycling, and just any other mobility-related matter in town. He's also been actively involved with securing grants to expand our trail network, which included securing funding for the Terriffill to Bloomfield connector, as well as downtown to Curtis Park. He's been involved in the design and permitting for those projects. And he was also instrumental in obtaining a number of grants for us for other types of infrastructure, such as rehabilitating town-owned bridges and improvements that we've made at the Performing Arts Center. Those are just a few of the examples of the type of work that Jeff performed during his time here. And he's a very humble and modest individual. He always went about his work in a very quiet yet steady way. But again, just truly probably one of the most dedicated public servants that I have ever had an opportunity to work with. So I'm going to miss him. Really want to wish him well. This is actually his second retirement. We were very fortunate to have him. He had previously retired from the city of Hartford. And we're just, I really wish him and his wife well. He will be staying with us part-time during the staffing transition until we get everything sort of back up and fully staffed. So very grateful to him for his offer to help us in the interim. But just again, really want to wish Jeff well.
Thanks for sharing that, Maria.
Yeah, you're welcome. Just a couple of other quick items from my office. As you know, I am currently serving on the board of directors for COST. I was asked to serve on their executive committee. They did hold their annual meeting last week, and I was elected to serve on their executive committee as well.
Congrats.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. It's a great organization, and I'm really glad to help with the good work that they're doing. And lastly, just a quick update on our Director of Planning Recruitment that is ongoing. We did have a very strong field of candidates, which was encouraging. There are a shortage of good planners right now, and I know our external panelists did comment on the fact that they were impressed with the strength of our pool. We narrowed down an initial group to a smaller group of finalists. Those group of finalists are here with us in mid-February. They will be doing day-long interviews with us with additional internal stakeholders as well as community stakeholders that didn't have an opportunity to participate in the first round. And we have also asked them for some writing samples and project samples that they've completed, and we'll be reviewing that as well. So we are looking forward to meeting with the finalists and continuing to work on that recruitment.
Thank you.
And that concludes my report this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so now we can move, Selectmen, Liaison, and Subcommittee reports. I'm getting ahead of myself. Does anybody have some reports that they would like to make tonight? I know that Amber does.
Let me I wanted to report that the zoning committee took up an amendment that the owner developer for the Tower Ridge apartment and anthology complex that's on Hot Meadow Street. There was a proposed a planned new building to be built there that was going to be 8,000 square foot commercial building, which is part of what makes that development a mixed use development. And the developer has been working to seek commercial tenants for that building and had been unable to secure retail tenants. And so they went before the zoning commission to ask for an amendment to have the zoning changed from commercial to residential. The zoning board considered this proposal and discussed it and voted 0-6 against this amendment. So the zoning board felt it was in the best interest of the town to keep the zoning there as mixed use, and so that was what happened there. So I know there's a lot of interest in this development, and I wanted to let people know that that happened at the meeting, and of course it's available online if anybody wanted to watch it on SCTV.
Thank you.
Thanks for that update.
Just a quick one.
Oh, sure.
We're gonna have a public safety, special public safety meeting on Thursday of this week at our regular scheduled time, 8 a.m. There's one topic on the agenda. It is the staffing request from the police commission to this board for the upcoming budget process. So one of the members of the police commission asked for this special meeting with support from the fire district and others. So I did honor that request and scheduled that meeting. So I'll report back the outcome of that, and obviously Chris and I will both be there. But the intent is to have the police commission basically make the presentation and discussion that they made to our board last week in that forum as well. So I think it's important from a transparency standpoint, just to make sure that we're giving forum there and having the public safety leaders in town weigh in if they so choose. So more to come from that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
I do.
Oh, Eric. Okay.
I'll start with the Spirit Council. We're in the middle of Black History Month, and they've been doing a 4-part historical awareness of race series, which has been excellent. You can view them all on SCTV. The part 3 is tomorrow. Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. And you can see that live or on demand on SCTV. I also wanted to share that I've been meeting with the Pollinator folks. The previous board approved a Pollinator Resolution. And during the upcoming budget process, there's going to be discussion about funding a project along the middle of Iron Horse, basically redoing the plantings there, which is something that's sorely needed. And I think what we have an opportunity to do, if folks are supportive, is partner with the pollinator experts to make sure that we're planting there is sustainable, it's going to be cost effective, and it's going to be something that the Tom's crews can maintain with minimal effort. So I'm excited about that, and it's a possible opportunity to really bring our proclamation to life.
Sounds good. Thank you.
One here, just to add through the EDC and Chamber of Commerce that the Chamber will be having an info session, one tomorrow at 6 p.m. and on Thursday the 17th at 8 a.m. Where it'll be informational on their merger with Granby's Chamber. So if anyone's interested in that.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay. So now we can move on to Selectmen action. And the first order of business are the tax refunds. So I'm going to jump right in. The Board of Selectmen move effective February 14th, 2022 to approve the presented tax refunds in the amount of $122,775.77 and to authorize Town Manager Maria E. Capriola to execute the tax refunds.
Move that.
Second.
Eric and give it to Eric was a tie. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Move on to the donation from the Hartford Federal Credit Union. If the Board of Selectmen supports accepting the Hartford Federal Credit Union we would move effective February 14th, 2022 to accept a donation from Hartford Federal Credit Union in the amount of $2,000 for the purpose of supporting Simsbury Community and Social Services Department's food programs.
I'll make that motion.
Amber, anybody want a second?
A second.
Heather, second that. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, that motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
with
you.
our thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so the next item is the proposed purpose and procedures for Community for Care. Maria, I'm not sure if you want to add a little dialogue here.
Oh, sure. So, some of you may recall that we have been trying to create purpose and procedure statements for mostly our temporary boards and committees that were created by resolution, but perhaps at the time of the creation, specifics such as number of membership slots, subcommittees, etc., may not have been identified. So, Community for Care, we have worked on creating some draft purpose and procedures for that group. This was reviewed with the committee. I would say probably one of the most significant changes that is proposed with this is that on the books we had 14 membership slots for this particular committee. However, there were often vacancies, there were difficulties achieving quorum, so it was discussed and decided that we would recommend to you all to bring the number of that group down to 7 members. But otherwise, I think much of what you'll see is very similar and comparable to what we've prepared for other groups.
Okay. I did have one comment on this. I did forward this just to Cheryl Cook, who is the chair, to make sure she saw it and she was agreed with it. And a little feedback I got is, I'm trying to find it, in section N, I think she had said when it was discussed that it says that the Community and Social Services Department shall be responsible for administrative tasks associated with scheduling and canceling meetings. She asked if we could potentially include an agreement with the chair or in collaboration with the chair on the cancellation. I don't know if that's normal or not, but.
Just a point of clarity, only the chair can cancel a meeting, so.
Well, then that's wrong. This doesn't say the chair.
Well, the administrative task would be the mailing of or notification of or the posting of, but the actual act to cancel a meeting can only be initiated by a chair of a board.
Okay, so you don't even have to, you're saying that doesn't need to be said.
Correct. I mean, you're the only person that can cancel a Board of Selectmen meeting.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, so,
You're
then.
the chair of the board.
Okay.
I mean, that's one of the rights and privileges right under statute of.
Okay,
of a
then
chair.
let's make that clear right here that it's up to the chair to cancel. She had just said it didn't state that and it was discussed, so I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, typically we will, as Sean indicated, we'll consult with the chair prior to canceling a meeting. Oftentimes if staff doesn't, have any agenda items, right, they'll reach out to the chair and say, I'm not aware of any agenda items. We're not carrying any forward. Staff doesn't have anything. Do you have anything? So usually there's, a conversation before the cancellation occurs. And then Sean said the administrative sort of task, if you will, of creating the cancellation notice, posting it to the website, posting it to the clerk's office, then staff will typically take care of those administrative duties.
Okay, so then it doesn't need to be said. Okay. Anybody? Well, I'll just move on. So I'll move February 14th, 2022 to approve the proposed purpose and procedures for the Community for Care Committee.
I'll move that.
Okay, Sean moved it. Heather seconded it.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Oh, hi, Kristen. Any opposed? Okay, so that motion carries. Okay, next up is the appointment of the Interim Planning and Community Development Director. Maria, would you like to give some background?
Sure. And hi, Tom. Welcome.
Oh, hi, Tom.
So as you may recall in the past, the charter is silent on interim appointments of department heads that are listed under the appointment section. But in an abundance of caution, our town attorney had previously advised that we could bring those interim appointments to the board essentially for confirmation. As you may also recall with past practice, when we've had an internal person filling in an acting or interim capacity, we've typically increased their compensation during that interim period associated with the increased duties and responsibilities. So this is very consistent with what we did the last time we had a vacancy in the planning office. And should you all support this motion, I will then execute a memorandum of agreement with the union just to confirm these terms. And also, just since Tom is here, I want to thank him for his very, very good work. He's just been an absolute pleasure to work with during this interim period. He's done an amazing job. And again, just really want to thank him for his effort.
Okay, well, we all appreciate that. So I move to appoint Thomas Hazel to the position of Interim Planning and Community Development Director, retroactive to January 1st, 2022, until such time that this motion is superseded by the appointment of another interim or permanent planning and community director. Further move to increase Mr. Hazel's salary to $96,056 on an annualized basis during his interim appointment as Planning and Community Development Director, and that his other employment-related benefits as affiliated employee remain in place. At the conclusion of his service as Interim Planning and Community Development Director, Mr. Hazel shall be permitted to return to his position as Assistant Town Planner with the salary and employment-related benefits assigned to that position.
I'll make that motion, and Tom, with our thanks, gotten a lot of good feedback on your hard work from the community, so appreciate that in this time of transition.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Second?
I'll second.
Eric will second that. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Congratulations to our new official interim planning director.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the recreation coordinator classification. I see Tom Taberski on the call. And Maria's here. So if anybody would like to describe this for us, that would be great.
Sure, I can start off and have Tom join in. Good evening, Tom. Hi. So some folks may recall this was actually a project we had started right before the pandemic happened, right before the lockdown happened. During the 1920 budget process, we had eliminated a full-time recreation supervisor position from the Parks and Recreation Fund due to the systemic and financial challenges that the fund was having at the time, particularly in regards to the area of programming. What we had also shared at that time was that we did not think we would have the ability to completely do away with all support to the department, meaning that some level of part-time programming support, whether it was part-time help or contracted or consulting services, would be needed. So we had been carrying forward a budgeted amount for those services. We had again started this project where we worked to create the classification of a recreation coordinator. We had presented the job description and the proposed hourly rate of pay to the personnel subcommittee, again, right before the pandemic had started in March of 2020, actually. Now that, again, we've started to see some stabilization in our work, and very, very much want to move forward with getting this part-time help in place as we're starting to look ahead to our summer programs and again starting to really more of a return to normal. So again, the funds are budgeted within the Parks and Recreation Fund for this position. And again, the job description and hourly rate of pay were previously endorsed by the Personnel Subcommittee. Tom, is there anything that you would like to add, or do you think that covers it?
No, I think you did a great job with that, and hopefully that the board will approve and we can get somebody in and help with these community events we're planning to do and a whole summer slate of activity.
Tom, safe to say, as we've discussed, there's a fair amount of this being done by yourself right now. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
What would you put that as obviously it ebbs and flows, but is there a possible percentage you could put on your week that's spent doing scheduling?
quite a bit. We've been busy with all the COVID transitions and activity planning. I don't know if you guys can hear me. I'm having a hard time.
You're fine.
Yeah.
I would say some weeks it's 50-50. Some weeks it's probably
okay. So we didn't hire a director of Parks and Rec and Culture to be managing the scheduling, which is an incredibly important value and considerable job. But I just want to make that point.
Thank you, Chris. I think that's a very important point, and that it's not the highest and best use of Tom's time. And, again, we really appreciate this board's commitment to supporting the Park and Rec infrastructure since we completed the Parks and Rec Master Plan. And so as we've continued to add capital projects to their portfolio, that is an area of focus, that Tom and Orlando and I really want the department, again, focusing on it. And when Tom has more programming support, again, they can provide more focus on some of those capital projects. So thank you very much, Chris, for bringing that point up. Yeah.
Just from an historical perspective, though, the reason that the original position was eliminated was due to the instability and lack of solvency in the fund.
Which we've.
So, I agree, but we're essentially going back up a position that was riffed a few years ago to save money. So that's the challenge with this fund, is as it ebbs and flows, there is more responsibility pushed on folks because of the nature of its insolvency in the past. So, I am a bit uncomfortable doing this outside the budget process. But
If I can just interrupt, we've had this position budgeted
This is second.
the last 2 cycles.
Yeah,
It
this
just
is 2
hasn't been
cycles.
filled.
Okay. So we haven't filled it. Again, this is still off cycle, so we haven't needed it for 2 years, and now we're putting it back in. So,
Well, we pushed it, last year, the decision last year, I always get screwed up with the calendar year versus last year. The decision we pushed it off was because of the onset of the pandemic and the uncertainty of the need, because the uncertainty of what would be delivered during the pandemic and whatnot. So I think we played a wait and see. I think the exact opposite has probably happened. We've probably leaned far more into town assets time to multitask, and this is a good example of it. So coming out of
I
it.
agree with you. My point, though, is without the projections of the solvency of the fund, I'm uncomfortable approving this tonight, because if the fund ends up being insolvent, we have to eliminate this position.
Well, the fund, yeah, but we're never going to project into infinitum the solvency of that fund, though, Sean. I mean, we don't have that crystal
My
ball.
point is, Chris, I haven't looked at the budget yet, and if we come in and we're upside down by $100,000, then we're not going to have wanted to approve this position. So if everybody can tell me that the fund is going to have a net positive for the year we're in, fine. But if we're at risk of 0 or negative, then I'm uncomfortable moving forward, because now we're going to ask the taxpayers to pay for this position, which is outside the budget.
Okay, so I think I'm fairly certain that, I would say with fair certainty that for the coming year, the fund will be.
Current year.
The money's there. Now, for next year,
That's the challenge, Chris, right? Is if the fund can't fund itself, then the taxpayers have to pay for this position. So I get that it was previously approved, but it was previously approved on an understanding that the funding was there in the revenue fund, not from the taxpayers.
Okay, so fair enough that it doesn't get it tonight. We're going to see this.
I'm not standing in its way. I just want to.
Well, we're going to see it. Listen, Tom's going to present it to us as part of his. If he doesn't get it, he's going to present it to us as part of his budget, and we're going to have to make the determination to fund it, which comes out of the taxpayers. So I think it's coming regardless.
That doesn't mean it's getting approved.
I'll just add that the revenues in the special program budget more than cover this position.
Okay.
And that fund has become more solid than only doing the work.
But it is valid. That doesn't mean it's going.
That's my only concern, Tom. I'm not trying to be a pain in the neck here. It's just, again, I don't want to keep going up and down on staffing, because again, the fund was not in a position to fund this, and we had to lay somebody off, which was a hard thing to do. We don't like to do that in this community, and I would rather have staffing that's not vulnerable to those layoffs due to financial insecurity. So if you're telling me that we're in a good position, I'll support it this evening.
Is the position that we're adding now exactly the same as the position that was laid off?
No, it is a different position. So it's a lower level programming position. It's a part-time position with no medical or pension benefits, because it's limited in terms of the number of hours that it's working. The previous position was a higher level recreation supervisor position that was full-time. That was also associated with a full benefits package. So different
what we're adding
and also very different financial implications.
It's
So what we're adding back
completely
in
different
is-
load to
Okay.
the.
It's half from a cost standpoint.
Okay.
But not a long term. But also for a different long term load too. And so. it's not
But
just-
again, I remember that budget hearing where we did it, and we were told at the time that the duties could be absorbed. So I get that things change.
No, Sean, at the
They
time
were
we had shared.
Specifically told that they could be absorbed, Maria. That it would be a challenge, but that they could be absorbed. I get that
In that
we're,
budget, we had the 2 part-time positions, that same budget.
we didn't fund them both, Tom.
We did.
I'm pretty sure they've been approved the last 2 years.
That's correct.
This was 4 years ago.
No, we nipped. It was 2 years ago that position was taken out.
1920.
Was it 20?
1920. Yep.
19.
1920.
Yeah. It was the part-time positions were funded in 21 and 22.
and we didn't fill them.
Due to a couple.
I'll go back and look at the tape.
Okay.
But
It's okay.
I'm
Well,
99% sure I was told we could absorb this.
we had presented an option, and I will go back and pull this for you, Sean, but my recollection is that we had presented an option that, again, we couldn't do fully without the position, but we had provided a couple of scenarios of part-time, non-benefits, essentially positions or contracted services that could help with some of the programming workload. But we'll go back and pull that.
I think it's.
I'll look at the history.
Yeah, I mean,
That's not my problem.
we did. Yeah. So did we talk about the absorption of the? Every organization is able to mold around the loss of a head count, right? You think it's impossible, and then somehow the amoeba sort of surrounds it, swallows it, and moves forward. But in this instance, where right now we're paying a highly compensated, educated, trained individual to spend 50% of their time, that's not the best use of that person. It's not the first visit of development. It's not the best use of the taxpayer dollar. That's why I want to kind of focus on the concept of absorbing it.
I don't disagree. I just don't want the taxpayers to pay for it because the taxpayers didn't approve it. The special revenue fund approved it. And to me, that matters.
I think if we get back into that position, Sean, we've got to reevaluate this position.
Right. That's my point, is the taxpayers didn't approve this, Chris. The special revenue fund is paying for it. It's a difference. It's the nature
Correct,
of it.
but yes, and I'd also like you to consider again that just the fact that we made the statement we could absorb it doesn't mean that we've actually it's the right thing to do on a go forward basis is to absorb it. And
I'm back to the financial solvency of the fund.
I'd rather spend the money and get. So we're going to vote on it.
Let's read the motion. How's that? The move effective February 14th, 2022 to create the classification of recreation coordinator and to approve the proposed job description as presented. Further move to approve placing the position at an hourly rate of pay between $25.13 to $30.03 an hour. Anybody want to make a motion? Move that?
So moved.
Chris? Anybody second?
I'll second.
Amber second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we've got more for Tom Taberski. We move on to the, let's see if this is going to be a tough one too. The proposed 2022 Simsbury Farms golf course fee schedule, which was attached to the in the agenda. If anybody wanted to ask any specific questions, otherwise I'll read the motion. Anybody have questions, concerns about the changes? Okay, so we move effective February 14th, 2022 to approve the 2022 fee schedule for the Simsbury Farms Golf Course as presented.
So moved.
Chris, move that. A second.
I'll second.
Eric, second that. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Now we get to the proposed 2022 aquatic facility and day camp fee schedule. And everybody has the attached, if anybody has questions on the costs that they'd like to ask. If not, I will read the motion. Getting off easy here,
Just,
Tom.
Can I be a little slow on this one?
Yeah.
I know that this particular item generated some conversation and some a mixed vote on Culture Parks and Rec because I think in particular the individual sessions are getting to a point where some members thought that it wasn't going to, be viable.
Sustainable.
But I understand, Tom, and perhaps you could just elaborate on this a little bit, that there are some costs, labor and other costs that are going up, and this is meant to,
Yeah, no, I appreciate the chance to speak on it, Eric. Yeah, these you're going to hear it in the budget that's coming up, but the fees are largely driven by the minimum wage increase. The amount of revenue we're generating by the increase will basically just cover the minimum wage in our lifeguards, our camp counselors, and some of the basic programming supplies associated with those activities. We do feel, the Parks and Recreation Commission strongly felt that, we are at a tipping point. That they feel we can't go much higher, and this goes back to those discussions we've had in the revenue fund subcommittee, whether, with the structural deficiencies with the revenue fund set up, with the full-time employees and salaries currently coming out of the user fees associated with Simsbury Farms and not being equitable, comparable conditions in the general fund. But that, everything from gas to markers and swimsuits and, their chlorine tablets. Everything is going up significantly and quickly, but, we're just proposing these basic increases to cover the minimum increase at this time.
Yeah.
Just so we're clear, for $125, where else do you go to get access to a pool for the summer?
Yeah.
I mean,
Tom, guys, I'm 100% supportive of this, but I know it generated a lot of conversation. It could raise questions for members of the community when they see this.
If you're a
But
senior,
yeah, Sean,
it's a
I think it's an
deal.
incredible value that they
I mean, you
provide.
could build one in your backyard for 40 grand, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be fun.
I'm right there. I'm right there with you.
Okay, so
And I know we always, just so you guys know, so just when you hear, just like sometimes I think some of us get, we hear the overuse of comparison to towns for certain things. This is one of those ones that comes up about golf course costs and comparative swim lessons and all that. I would just always remind people to look at the quality of our facility, and just because someone has to pay $5 more than, but just think about all that in totality, and because that's brought to us as a justification sometimes, and I just think there's a lot in the intangible that you can't put into the value of that experience up there. So.
I mean, Tom, despite the hard time I do give you, you run a first-class facility, and we do appreciate that.
No, I know you guys are all, and we appreciate that as well, and we all do our best with the level of funding that we have, and my staff from John and Orlando all the way down, they do a fantastic job, taking care of our residents.
I agree.
I think
I have a question about the camps, the day camps. Is one of them not going to happen, the Koala Kids Camp? Because it looks like it's blacked out.
Yeah.
We are not. That's correct. That's again, it's a labor-intensive program. We haven't done that for the last few years due to COVID, and taking care of that age group. Minimum wage going up and being able to trying to find staff. I just don't think it's the right time. And me doing the job, that's adding on 2 additional camps, the Adventure Camp and the Koala Kids program. That I just can't do it all. And even with the program coordinator, it's asking a lot at this point, until we have somebody up and running and really tackle that.
I guess my question, I understand it from a staffing standpoint. I just know that as a parent of school-age kids, a lot of parents rely on the camps in the summertime. So I just wasn't sure how that was going to impact people, or if the student, if they would be able to go to a different camp, or just what that would mean for someone that uses those camps.
Yeah, it's a good question, Amber. We have raised the limit of the camp stuff to do from 60 kids when I started here to 90. And so we're accommodating quite a few people that way. It's the younger age groups. You need more staff. You need the right facility. And we're using the Apple that we've turned into our contractual enrichment program site, where that program used to be held. So we're actually generating, from a revenue standpoint, which sometimes is all comes back to revenue. From a revenue standpoint, we can generate more with 8 weeks of contracted programs at the Apple Barn than I can do 8 weeks of Koala Kids. And it doesn't solve the problem of addressing a programming need for kindergartners and preschoolers. So we try to find some spots here or there. It's just, a lot of families have indicated they would like a full day program. That used to be a half day. It's very difficult, with not trained, educated staff to run that program with high school and freshmen in college. It's just, it's difficult. It takes a lot of time, and unfortunately, I have to allot, our resources to what I think we can do best.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks. Okay, so move effective February 14th, 2022 to approve the 2022 fee schedule for aquatics facilities and day camp programs as presented.
So moved.
Chris, again? Second?
I'll second.
Oh, Eric, second. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries. Okay. Yep, thanks.
Thank you.
So next up, we have a bunch of appointments that I will read from here. The proposed appointment to Community for Care. Move effective February 14, 2022 to appoint Lydia Tadone as a regular member of the Community for Care Committee with a term expiring December 4th, 2023.
So moved.
Eric?
Aye.
Sean? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that carries. Proposed appointments of Friends of Simsbury Farms board members. Move effective February 14, 2022 to appoint the following people to the Friends of the Simsbury Farms Board. I'm just going to read their names. Tom Cross, Greg Work, Jerry Wetchen, Dave Bush, Mike Pendergast, Sam Randy, and Jerry Toner. Both they're expiring in 2022 and some in 2023.
Move that.
Sean?
Second.
Chris, second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries.
Thank
Well, I guess
you.
it does carry. Okay, so proposed appointments to the Technology Task Force. Move effective February 14, 2022 to appoint Rob Parisi, Stephen Alexander, and Prashant Sayamagalam as regular members of the Technology Task Force with terms ending December 4th, 2023.
So moved.
Amber and Heather second. All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries. Let's scroll down to propose appointment to the Business Development Committee. This is to finish out a term for Rob Pomeroy, who is left. Move effective February 14th, 2022 to appoint Derek Peterson as a regular member of the Business Development Committee with a term ending August 13th, 2022. Sean, any second?
Second.
Eric, second. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, that carries. Appointment of Mark Ornstein to the Library Board of Trustees. Micah's been very excited about this. Move effective February 14th, 2022 to appoint Mark Ornstein as a regular member of the Library Board of Trustees with a term ending December 4th, 2023 to fill a vacancy created by the resignation of Amber Abuel.
Can I make that motion?
We have to,
Do I need?
Yeah.
I think I will.
Okay. Amber made that and Heather second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. Good luck, Mark. Reappointment of Susan Messino to the Open Space Committee. Move effective February 14th, 2022 to appoint Susan Messino as a regular member of the Open Space Committee with a term ending December 4th, 2023.
So moved.
Chris and Sean, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now I'm going to do what I learned last time.
Yes.
Gonna move that we accept, effective February 14, 2022, that we reappoint all the people as named on this agenda item. Sean moves that. Anybody want to second that?
I'll second.
Amber second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for that. Okay, then we have 3 sets of minutes here. Minutes from 2024, yes, from the future. The regular minutes of January 24th, January 27th, a special meeting, and special meeting February 7th. Anybody has any changes, or are the minutes okay as they stand?
I have a change.
Okay.
I'm a Mr. Getz on one of the lines.
Oh, no.
To find it.
Sorry, I've been Mrs. Asking before.
You have been.
That might allow you to get out of something, though.
I just have to go back
So
and
that
find which
wasn't-
line it was.
Oh, thank you.
We can do a word search. What was the date? Which set of minutes was it?
Here it is. So it is January 24th. Let me see.
Okay, do we do the move to make the adjustment to change Mr. Getz to Ms. Getz?
We can do that. We can do that.
Agenda, so if anybody want to move that?
Sorry, Heather.
Heather, no, you don't want to change that for her? Somebody second.
Second.
Chris second. Mr. Getz, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, so the minutes, and now we get to the communication section. And the first item on our communication section is the Pine Hill Memorandum from Tom Roy, from Public Works. Tom put together a timeline, which we had asked for after we had the outpouring at the ARPA section, so everybody could see that the history of this issue in that neighborhood. And is Tom on to weigh in on this, if he would like to add some color commentary here? Hey, Tom.
Tom.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. And to answer questions,
I don't
too.
know what more I can add.
Okay.
I think, we've generally tried to do a good job and been fair to the residents as much as we can.
Okay.
Laid out kind of what the issue is. And unfortunately, I think it comes down to a decision as to whether or not this is something the board wants to support, one, and two, whether or not it would be ARPA funded.
So Tom, is it fair to say in summary of the memo that the Pine Hill Board of Directors has known since at least 2003 of this issue?
That would be accurate.
Of course, it's been different members of the board, but it's been a known issue for 20 years with different members and different people residing there, right?
Is it to the best of your knowledge, is it an accurate statement, Tom, that the transfer of ownership it's been noted a couple times in the 70s from EB over sort of worked in that sequence of events, that the sewers were either, I imagine there were no sewers there at the time that the EB paid for sewer lines to be put in, or I don't know, did they upgrade old sewers and then put?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know what's with the audio. But Chris, the sewers would have been in there when the homes were originally constructed.
All right, so there were sewers there, and then the claim that EB did some sewer project occurred. So that was a replacement of existing sewers, and then transferred ownership. That's what I've heard twice.
No, I don't believe that's accurate, Chris.
That was.
Am I watching a different movie?
No,
What
that
I've
was
heard twice is that EB replaced sewers with inefficient sewers or inadequate sewers, not to code sewers, and then transferred ownership.
right. So during public comment, Tom, I wasn't sure if you were able to hear, but some residents had made some comments that perhaps EB had constructed sewers that weren't to standard in the 1970s, and there was not, to my knowledge, as well as Tom's, a separate project that occurred at some point in the 1970s. Standards do change over time,
Sure. Okay,
so what may have been, perhaps put in the 1970s, for example, right, isn't current today. I'll just use my own house as a for example. My house was built here in Simsbury in the early 1970s, and I share a line with a house down below on another street, and it's a 6-inch diameter versus what's a current standard of an 8-inch diameter.
I have my water line from a public water line into my house is not current standard. It's half an inch smaller than it would be normally. So I get
But the time it was constructed, it was current standard. So I think that's most likely what occurred in this case.
What I'm saying is why I asked that for someone to educate me in case they know, because I don't like statements like that being floated out, which may or may not, which become gospel rather than.
It's also a private transaction.
Yeah. So
between a former owner and former owners. Tom, can you help me, or can you help educate us all just quickly on today? A street comes to the WPCA and says, we want sewers, right? Mm-hmm. So the process is what? And the cost is what from a normal experiential standpoint for sewers?
If you lived on a street that currently has septic systems, and perhaps you had a failed septic system, or perhaps you were buying a new home and had concerns about being on a septic system which has the risk of failure, you would write a letter to the WPCA petitioning for sanitary sewers. We would hold a public hearing, and if the public hearing was positive, the WPCA would vote for us to do a full investigation. We would go out and do a survey, we would come up with a preliminary design, and we would be able to come back with a fairly accurate cost estimate. There would be a public hearing where the cost estimate would be presented to all of the affected residents. They generally take a straw poll as to who within the project is interested in the sanitary sewers. The public hearing is closed, and the WPCA would then vote on whether or not to move forward with the project. It's often a little bit controversial because residents feel that they're voting, and they misunderstand at times that the straw poll is just a way for the WPCA to get a sense of what the neighborhood would like to do. Once the sewer project is constructed, every single home that's served is assessed their proportional portion of the overall construction cost.
Whether they hook up or not,
if it was 10 homes and it was $1 million, it would be divided up by 10. They then have the ability to finance that over a 10-year period to the WPCA.
Is that inclusive of the lateral and the hookup, Tom?
The lateral and the hookup fee is $4,095, and that's in addition to the project cost. And the lateral is up to each individual home. The other way that sewers can be installed would be as if there was a new subdivision being put into town. The developer often would put in the sanitary sewers at their own cost. They would do it to the WPCA standards, and then they would ask the WPCA to accept and take over responsibility for the sewers.
Similar to how we accept roads from subdivisions as well, right?
Exactly the same process.
Just for point of, I've been through that process twice, worked exactly like Tom described it as far as sewers. Unfortunately, my half the neighborhood said no twice, so we have half of our street has sewers and the other half doesn't. So that's how it works, and it's fair and it's effective.
Just a ballpark, do you know how many folks are hooked up in town to the sewer of the 9,000 plus households? Give or take number, I won't hold you to it specifically. Half, 60%, 70%, whatever?
Lower than that, much lower, probably closer to 25%.
So 25% of this town is potentially hooked up to the sewer, give or take, we'll call it 5%, right? And is it fair to say that almost every one of those folks went through some sort of assessment process as you described, and hookup, et cetera, they paid for it at some point? So
The only, everybody would have been through that process. The only ones that may have been different would have been a few homes in the Terriffill section where the WPCA essentially originated. But I don't know that for a fact at this point.
And Tom, just understanding it, just for my own education, in the neighborhood, they have sidewalks, I believe, a part of the sidewalks, and those sidewalks, are they responsible for the upkeep of those sidewalks, or are we? And they are. Okay.
it's noted the roadways are in disrepair as well, right?
Okay.
Right.
So that's part, and maybe because the HOA with the funding of the HOA and the reserves was brought up tonight, and I was just curious about. So that would be, I'm part of an HOA in another area, and I imagine that's part of what those funds would go towards, which would be roads and sidewalks for infrastructure, correct?
Yeah.
That's probably the way it is over there.
I mean, when I lived at Riverwalk, I mean, that's exactly, we had to pay for our own paving, own water lines. I mean, water lines popping all the time, yeah.
But I was just thinking, if the other, if it was the reverse, it would have been one of those sort of cost-sharing scenarios where if we were going in there anyways, to your point on fiber or gas, Sean, a few weeks back, if they was being ripped up, there would be a cost share. But this would be, the sidewalks and roads are entirely upon them. Okay.
But
Just
I
like
think
the
if we
sewers.
did this project, they would get their roads paved as part of the project.
Well, that's a Tom.
Yes.
Yes.
As one of the things that we learned when we did a very similar project in Maple Court was because they had narrow roads and we were going to be digging up the vast majority of the roads, and we can repave roads in town cheaper than a private contractor could, we included that all in. So they would at the end have brand new roads, brand new sewers.
So essentially, there's a deal on the table that's been presented that's afforded to any development, whether private or public, that offers basically on-bill financing over a period of time at the interest rate, as you said, equal to whatever our bond rate is, which is like $1.25 right now, right? I mean, so not a loan that's available in any commercial space.
Yeah.
And the costs are substantially reduced from what folks would have to do on an independent basis to go out and get this done, right?
Yes, and the other thing, just to be very transparent, is the cost estimates on this are very high-level cost estimates. We have not done soil borings, we haven't done in-depth analysis, but they are intentionally conservative at this point. I don't want to make promises, but we would hope that we would be below that 650 number. But again, at this point for planning stages, that was the number that we developed.
I mean, one thing that, it doesn't give a cost number for back to 2003, I think, but in 2015, the cost estimate was $532. And by 2021, it's now $650. And if this fails and the work has to be done at a bad time of the year, we don't know. Costs are only going to go up from here, it seems like. I mean, so, this isn't getting any better. And if it happens when it fails, as opposed to when it's a planned project, that could add to the cost of it, correct?
Well, I think what would happen now is if there was failures, we would go out and if they couldn't do it themselves and this fell into a state where the town had to take it over, or the HOA, if something fails, they're going to go out and spend money for a spot repair. They're going to have a contractor come in and dig up a clogged lateral or a clogged mainline sewer, make a repair that then will not be incorporated into the final product. So
Right.
it's essentially paying for a Band-Aid, not going to help in the final product.
Right. I mean, an untimed replacement is going to be more expensive than if it is done when we can, before that happens.
Whose responsibility
Yeah, I agree with
is
that,
that? Tom, whose responsibility is that if something fails right now?
The deep, I think.
It would fall to the HOA.
But through deep, you said deep would have to come in if it was a disaster, right? Isn't that?
But we would do the work.
Well,
That
that's
our town would have to do the work.
Deep would come in and condemn the system and then issue a consent order to the
Right.
WPCA, who would have to fix it at whatever the cost is, with whatever ramifications are at that point in time.
Right.
Right. So
Yes.
letting it. So I want to bring it back to the ARPA question. Okay, and this is it's not an easy topic, but the ARPA money is there, and if regardless of the ARPA money, this was a need that existed. Okay, so the question of whether or not it qualifies as ARPA or doesn't qualify as ARPA is the question of, should we use the federal funds for a private HOA for an issue that needs the money? Okay, and again, we could talk about that. Not everybody is in a financial situation that needs the money. And either way, if it was, then does that open us to other groups asking us to do the same for them? I know the argument from Pine Hill is we're the only ones asking, but we're the ones who will sit here and have to address future people to say, why did we pay for them?
Oh.
You need to pay for us.
I mean, I disagree. We have dozens of people asking for ARPA money, but I mean, we have.
But are we giving it to everybody that asks for ARPA money?
No, not necessarily. I guess
Well-
my point is there's a lot of folks
Yeah,
asking for ARPA
well, what I
money.
was going to
Yeah.
say is too, this is another point. We can use the ARPA money for a lot of existing priorities that help multiple residents, may relieve some future taxes. We have lists of things for social workers, for Parks and Rec to improve, for the Housing Authority. We're asking for Farmington Valley Health District. So I guess the question is whether or not this would qualify. Is this something the board would want to use the funds for?
Well, so I'll answer your
Wait,
question.
let me just ask another question. That's one question.
Let
And
me
then,
write the first question down. Hold on.
well, so the question, so that's one question, because, and then again, not everybody, some people could afford to do the work, so we would be paying for people who could afford to have this work done, right? So that's another potential. So my opinion, well, I want to hear what other people on the board think.
Can I ask you two questions? So I understand the question, but not to answer it though, unfortunately.
Okay.
Were you asking? It confused me when you first asked. Were you asking if this issue is presented to us?
Yes.
Under alternative circumstances, the ARPA didn't exist.
Would we pay for? No, I didn't ask that, but that's a question.
Okay, that's a question. And then the second is, just for clarity, so the work that you all have done, fantastic work in the ARPA. It's safe to say that the things that we are considering on that list of potential items to fund from ARPA don't holistically benefit all 25,000 people in the town of Simsbury. Some of them are special interest focused by nature because of the organizations.
Sure.
Special interest, please don't, I'm
Yeah.
struggling
That's
to
a
find
good
another
point.
word for it.
True.
And so we are setting precedent by funding things that aren't universal services, if you will, like a road is a universal service to me, in the police. Okay, so that's just for clarity, there are projects on there that are somewhat focused on their user, their consumers. Okay.
True.
Thank you.
That is true. So just,
Well, one of the things that's interesting for me on that, Wendy, is that when I think about one of the first considerations that were put forward as far as the guardrails of ARPA was water. Was the concept of water, right? It was a continuity of water delivery, right? And for health purposes, whichever. Is this somewhat in that vein? Because if we have a catastrophic loss and disaster, we could have a pollutant scenario where this does affect our community's water source, potentially, whether it's lines, whether it's.
5% of the town has leach fields in their backyard, so.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking along the lines of how do you get closer to finding, does it fit underneath the concept, the intent around health and wellness, which was one of the guardrails of ARPA, I'm thinking. That's all, just putting that out there.
I mean, I think that was 6th or 7th on the priority list of ARPA, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who have I mean, we could look at people who have lost income, jobs, things like that from ARPA and make them whole if they ask.
Sure,
right?
I'm just.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I didn't study ARPA implicitly. I just remember that was one of the things early guide posts was delivery of certain quality of life and health concern.
Okay, these guys, go ahead.
Yeah, I just kind of, when I think of the ARPA money, want to circle back to during the goal setting when I said that, really to benefit the most amount of people, it's to benefit the taxpayer. And by doing that, if you can offset it, against something fungible, then that actually does help everyone.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And so I just, that's where I kind of stand on the ARPA funding.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, the Pine Hill situation I think is hard. My heart goes out to those people, but at the same time, I mean, I just don't know what kind of precedent it sets in the HOA realm of things. I don't know neither the board, so if anyone has an answer to that or how that looks.
That is a concern.
Exactly
That is
right. I mean,
that is a concern.
I mean, Chris, you asked, and when you summarized the right question, if ARPA didn't exist, would we do this? And I think the answer is no. We have the WPCA, which assesses folks that then hook up. Those folks get a bill every year, they get a connection fee every year, and the users pay for the service. So this is unprecedented in terms of any taxpayer, whether it be Simsbury, Connecticut, or the United States of America taxpayer, funding a hookup for 39 users when the other 25% of the community, some owner somewhere paid for that infrastructure, which improved or maintained the value of their property. And to me, that's where it's unprecedented, and that we're going to potentially use earmarked federal dollars that are supposed to help folks in a pandemic overcome 20 plus years of mismanagement of an HOA. I agree, it's a sad situation and it's unfortunate, but poor fiscal management of the HOA is the reason that these folks are in this, not the town of Simsbury or the WPCA. And again, this is not what the WPCA is for, or the taxpayers are to fund individual hookups. And again, I feel bad for these folks. I hope they can get help, but again, that's where I commend Tom and the team for offering, I think, a really generous loan program. And again, it's hard. But again, if this is a disaster, I'm really struggling with why the board of the Pine Hill Group for 20 years hasn't properly addressed this issue.
And I give them some leeway on that. Again, I agree. It's been a known issue and it's been ongoing, and either people have come and gone and maybe but it's still.
They consciously made a decision to reduce their fees and dip into the revenues that were supposed to fund this. I mean, they consciously.
Right, so it's different people, but it's still, the issue's still there, and maybe everyone isn't looped in, but it's been an issue.
I feel for them. This is one of the challenges of an HOA.
Yeah, and the other thing Tom put in his write-up that I wanted to point out was Dino Nobel, Ensign Bickford, has owned other neighborhoods that they took on the sewer themselves, and they're currently paying for these sewer fixes, correct? On page 3.
Right.
You have the project
That's correct.
So they're currently paying for work similar to this that they took on themselves, Dino Nobel, right? And this group just somehow they made that deal, whatever. Maybe whatever Dino Nobel did, maybe they should call Dino Nobel. But the other, so basically, I think what I'm hearing is the best case for this group is to move forward with the WPCA and get a firm estimate and buy-in from the group. The only question that comes back to me is the, struggling people that live there that cannot afford to do this, which could happen to any of us if our septic goes and we don't have the income or the money to pay for a $25,000 septic system. So I was trying to see if there was any programs that we offered for people in a situation like that. So I know we have a tax credit program. That's irrelevant, but if it's a way to offset money for these people that are hurting, or if there is a way that when we implement this project, and again, this will also be a precedent setting, is to have an income level, some sort of income level, offer, cost share, do we use money from ARPA to have, again, a grant program for lower income people to do something, to fund something they were impacted by COVID that was unforeseen. But regardless of that, it doesn't stop them from just moving forward with the WPCA on this project. And that it sounds like the board here would not be inclined to fund it through ARPA at this point in time or future, because there's multiple sources, ways we can use this funding, which is new information, right, as of this year.
So just for myself, I'm not ready to say that.
Okay.
Because I don't know where we stand on our ARPA hierarchy yet. Now,
Okay.
I believe we're having a next distillation, correct, of ARPA projects and possibilities coming up, right?
Well, here, I was going to say what we're talking about as a group is now that the ARPA funding is pretty much can be used as the revenue loss and can be used for government services. And there's uses that are allowed for capital projects like HVAC for the schools. I'd name something else, playgrounds, because of things like that. The money can be used for a wider range of things. So what we're talking about doing is the work group kind of, once the final rule came out and the rules changed
So
drastically.
you're actually broadening the net back again.
The plan right now, which we have to talk about, is to incorporate the assignment of the funds and the projects during our budget process, because all this stuff's going to come to us during the budget process, the wish lists, this ask, this capital project, and all six of us will be at the table. So why not look at things that we might be able to pay for and use the ARPA fund or general services to pay for 2 social workers at the Board of Ed that they need for the schools.
Right.
Those are kind of things that are coming.
Or the businesses,
or
or the
bus-
nonprofits, or.
And so Maria has some asks. I took some asks from the original list. I was going to send it to everybody next meeting with some data and columns that says where the item originated from, if it's a town manager request, if it was a request from the chamber, if it's a request from the police commission, if it came from public hearing, and then say the money amount and how does it qualify under ARPA, and then we could all look at those as we go through the budget and make decisions that way. So we could still leave this. We're stringing them along because they need to take action soon, I guess is the question.
I think they should not wait.
So that's the question. I understand what you're saying. Like if we look at everything and we don't have enough, like we can't spend all the money,
correct,
right? Will there be a better use of the funds for more people than for this group?
I'm just answering myself. I'm not ready to say no. That's all.
Okay. And I don't know if we. Okay.
Yeah, and again, just from my perspective, I think the larger policy issue here, and it was touched on this evening, is the equity issue, and that this, if we were to go down this path, I think we not only have a taxpayer equity issue in terms of the roads, as a for example, that would get fixed as part of this project. Also, but for the users of the enterprise fund. So just as a reminder, the sewer fund is an enterprise fund. It is fully self-sustaining, including its capital. And we do also have users from 2 other towns that are part of that enterprise fund as well. So really, there's sort of the taxpayer equity issue, but then there's really an equity issue for those participants in the sewer fund. So it is, I think, a bit of a precedent that it could, I think, cause some significant issues for us if we were to proceed with using, again, public dollars to fund private infrastructure. Perhaps there could be some legal issues in addition to equity issues. So I think it's something that if you were very serious about, we would have to think very long and hard and probably seek legal counsel as well before proceeding down the path.
I mean, to me, just to add in, to me, I think, and this is the frustration with the feds and with ARPAs, they just say sewer and infrastructure and broadband. And what I believe the intent is, if you have a big field that no one but the town owns or otherwise, so let's say it's town forest, and the only way to get the sewer line to these folks or to get a telephone line, an electrical line, broadband to these folks is to go through town property. Yeah, I think we would probably talk about using ARPA, because who are you going to ask to pay for that? The lateral to go through there. Once you get to the street, the broadband connection, the electrical connection, the phone line, the sewer is on the person or persons that are going to use it. And the intent is most of this country, out west and other places, has connectivity issues to rural and some suburban communities. Not where the laterals are all there in a lot of places. That's not the intent of this money. It's if you have a long stretch that no one owns and no one's responsible for, potentially using it to get access to a larger portion of the community.
Or if you just needed to make capital repairs to your sewer system that serves an entire community,
If
right?
it was municipal
I mean,
funded,
if
it was municipal funded,
we're
yes.
in that situation, I think you would be able to make the case that it's benefiting everybody.
The cistern project in Hartford, where again they're dumping their raw sewage in because their storm drains are hooked up to the plant and they're trying to fix it. You know, those are versus again. I feel for these folks, but I don't really think this was never in my mind what ARPA was supposed to be for.
So just to add something to maybe make Chris feel more comfortable, and we're not voting, we're just trying to get a consensus so this group can move on. And, you know, people will probably be angry, and, you know, this is how it has to be. It has to be fair and equitable, and we're having discussion. We could, so the argument of the affordable housing, you know, they're not deed restricted affordable housing. They're
Naturally occurring.
Naturally occurring. Thank
The
you.
market rate.
Market
affordable.
rate. And so obviously this would help their market, you know, their property values if this work happens. So that would contribute to that. But the argument that there are people there that are struggling, that's where I kind of tune in, right? Because if people could afford it, if it's $150 a month for 10 years, like we'd all have to pay that if it was a homeowner kind of thing. People who can't afford that, you know, so that's the population. And there may be other people like that in the town itself with a similar situation. You know, today was the first time to me they really mentioned COVID. I don't know if it's tying in as a reason, but other people that might be struggling with things at their home due to COVID. And that's what I kind of thrown out to Tom. If there was a way to create a program like we talked about the 501c3 program, again, you'd have to administer it, but, you know, could people request money if they met a certain income level?
I mean,
to
we have
do
programs,
something?
right? I mean, if folks are struggling with
tax
social
credit.
services, with heating, with
Yeah.
I mean, with
Oh,
food
yeah, true.
insecurity, I mean, again, I don't want to put folks in that position, but we do have social programs. And again, to me, there are many ways to help. Not raising their taxes is
Well,
one
that
way
would
to
be
help
another
too.
way too.
Right,
Yeah.
or minimizing the tax increase, which is part of the attempt of ARPA, is to minimize everybody's tax increase.
Yep.
So that you don't just have that bill. The other piece is, again, I don't want folks to struggle, but we have food insecurity, we have heating. And again, if we fund those, are we not only benefiting the potential residents that are impacted at Pine Hill, but the rest of the community, which again, to me, was the intent of ARPA.
I have a question about the bond the financing through the WPCA. Is there any way to increase that 10-year term? Can you make it a little longer to make it more affordable for certain people? Or maybe you would have to do it for the whole project probably, but.
Tom, he's smiling.
That's actually a really good question. I think it's something we're going to discuss at the WPCA level. There is an option of doing a 15 or a 20-year note.
And the other thing would be, what is the time frame? Like, let's say if we decided to start doing the research on whatever it's going to take to do the next dive into this project, whether it's funded, no matter how it's funded, I guess, how long, what is the time frame for getting this done if everybody decided tomorrow to get started? How long is this?
It would probably take about 3 months to be to the point of having a preliminary design and a cost estimate that could be presented to the WPCA. From there, we would be issuing a construction contract, which would be done in one construction season.
So we're looking at next summer before we get done, or maybe late this year, Tom?
If everybody truly got on board right away and everything fell together, it could possibly be late this construction season, but most likely it would be 2023.
But is there a cost to the HOA to start that process now? Is there anything stopping that from happening so that everybody knows what these costs are and it's ready to go if the project goes forward?
It's a little bit complicated with it being an HOA. If it was a residential neighborhood, once the petition came in, that there would be a preliminary hearing of the WPCA where they would decide to make a project go forward. Once that occurs in a private neighborhood, it's the decision of the WPCA as whether or not the final project is going to construction or not. There's some issues with this being an HOA as to whether or not the WPCA has the authority to, after we all come together with a final number, to say we're going forward with the project.
Because conceivably, they would have to vote, subject to their bylaws, right, to approve it and then do the assessment?
That's my understanding, yes.
Yeah, because it's complicated, because when we did an assessment at Riverwalk, when I was on that board, it was a very long process. And it's prescribed in the bylaws in Kiowa. I mean, there's a lot of attorneys, so it's, their property manager would have to guide them through it. It's a challenging and long process to do.
But it sounds like what you're saying is that if the HOA votes for the WPCA to come in and make this assessment, that the WPCA could then decide to go forward with the project, whether the HOA votes in favor of it or not.
No.
Yeah, and what the problem is we're never going to get 100% of the people agreeing, and everybody involved is going to end up having to pay a share of the project.
Well, but Tom, clarify though, the HOA doesn't have the authority without the vote of the members to incur this expenditure, right? That's my
understanding, but I'm getting very much into Bob DiCrescenzo's territory here.
Right. So to answer Amber's question, the answer is no. The HOA can't come to the WPCA tomorrow without the support of whatever their bylaws say.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge is these are private streets.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean that's the complicating factor here is it's not your normal resident straw poll go. Again, because correct me if I'm wrong, is WPCA would actually assess the HOA. The HOA would then turn around and
have to assess the residents,
its property owners, to pay for that debt incurred.
I believe when we did this on Maple Court, which was very similar, we assessed each individual property.
Did you? Okay.
We did not assess the HOA.
Good.
The HOA was involved early on in the project and helped garner the support for the project.
All right. That's good.
So the HOA has to approve the WPCA to come in and make this assessment.
I believe so, because they have to issue us the easement to put our sanitary sewers inside of their development.
Okay.
And I just want to say, I thought some of the issues they had was that some of the HOA members, some of the homes are owned by landlords who rent out the property, so they're not there, they don't care, like, so to speak. I think, wasn't that part of an issue along the line?
I know that was mentioned, but I don't think the mere fact that they're not owner occupied changes the fact that, if you own the property,
they still have to fix
you have
it.
a responsibility to it.
Yep. They may have voted no, that might be, maybe they won't vote, but they're just gonna lose value on their property, so they should be voting yes. Right? Okay. So I think what we're saying, regardless of ARPA, that they should move forward to pursue that path sooner than later.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I'm sure myself, Tony Piazza, we're going to do whatever we can to help them through this process, answer any questions. When we met with them in November, one of the things we suggested was that if the sewers were not in an awful state, they may actually be able to get away with doing sanitary sewer lining, where we would fix the existing pipes. The WPCA actually allowed us to use our equipment to do a preliminary assessment, and unfortunately, we found that they were in bad shape and they couldn't be lined.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, are we good to end that conversation on the thing? Tom, thank you for all your work on this. It was very insightful and interesting to read about it. So now we get to go to,
Thanks, Tom.
pardon? Oh,
Hold on.
Good night.
Bye, guys.
bye. So our next item is the letter that we have in here to incoming Commissioner, Department of Administrative Services. I liked a lot about the letter that was in here. I thought it was respective of the state police and their needs. It also invites them to come and do a presentation for us, which I think is really a good thing to share the knowledge and allow us to ask questions to them. It addresses the concerns that some of us have about residents. I don't know if anybody is planning to go through this to add to the letter, but I would be comfortable with the letter as is, except I would add a CC as discussed to Senator Whitco's, Representative Hampton, and Governor Lamont, which was in the original letter. But I'm opening that for anybody who has questions or wants to talk about the letter.
So just to be clear, Wendy, you've already met with the commissioner who told us this was happening, right?
I was invited by,
Well,
Not to put on you, but
Well, Sean, the
Bob?
commissioner actually wasn't there,
no,
But-
but the
I saw
staff
the email.
members there told us that it was moving
It was
forward.
happening.
It was moving forward. So
Yeah.
again, I'm fine with the concept of a letter here, but I don't want to create the illusion that this is actually going to sadly do anything.
well, so that was,
We've already been told it's happening.
my feeling is, this is our letter. It sides with both, we know it's moving forward. We believe it's moving forward. We have reasons to think we wouldn't like it to move forward, but we understand that it would, and we have a relationship with the state police and state agencies that we need to maintain to do business.
Yeah.
And that if we send this letter, we've said what we've said. It's been in 3 newspapers over the last 3 years. 3 years. Oh my God.
It's been in the newspaper.
It's been in the newspaper quite a bit. We've all been quoted. Chris, Sean, everybody was quoted in the paper.
Because they watched our meeting.
Yeah, I know. I read,
Yeah.
it was
They
quote
didn't
for
call us.
quote. No, I know. I could read, it was like the minutes of the meeting.
Yeah.
And I've said to Bob that I feel like this is what we're doing, and this is what we're doing. And we'll send the letter because this is how we feel. And
So just to that end, Wendy, I don't like the first bullet point, and that I think it's fear mongering using elementary school semi-automatic gunfire. I mean,
well, that's what we've heard.
We have that's I don't think that's a real concern. We have Instant Bickford that blows things up 3 times a day.
I don't have
And
a
there's a
problem.
range next door, so
It doesn't sound like this though.
I think this is fear mongering. I don't like the elementary school kids can hear semi-automatic gunfire. Well, tell your kids that those are the police officers training to keep them safe.
I disagree.
Okay, so I disagree, Sean, just because I think that that's real. And I think that if, I don't think things like that were probably factored into the state when they did their study. Did they put engineers on the elementary property for every day for a month and see how often they heard automatic gunfire?
Do kids know what it is until somebody tells them?
I hope they don't ever have to know what it is.
Yep.
I mean,
And this is
police
what
officers
we're
training
creating
this.
that's what
It's not violence. It's not war. It's police officers training to keep them safe.
I think overall, though, Sean, I think that my opinion is that this thing does not belong in our town, regardless if it's near an elementary school or not, or kids can hear it or not. You shouldn't have to hear this thing. This should not be in our town. No one should hear it, and under any circumstance. That's what pisses me off about this whole thing.
I guess hearing it, I think, is candidly a ridiculous argument. I don't like hearing cars. I don't like hearing a lot of things, but we don't send letters to commissioners on it.
Well, I still
we're
think that's
sensationalizing it.
I don't think we're sensationalizing it. I think that's a fact from the residents.
It's not a fact, it's an opinion.
It's-
That elementary school kids can hear it.
Well, they
what?
can.
So what? What is the problem with
Well, in the
elementary
new-
school kids
in the new-
hearing police officers trained to keep them safe?
But we could look at the last, how many years, when it's become an issue to hear that sound at an elementary school.
Why?
And
What has happened as a result of it?
not as a result of
What has
do you want
happened
me
to
to
kids?
name all the events of the past 20?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate
One
that
has nothing to do with the other, Wendy. These are the police officers keeping them safe so those events don't happen in their school.
Okay. I still think it's a valid
All right,
point.
well, so you say it's fear mongering. I say it's factual.
I think it's factual
I think it's
too.
a fact. We're not stating
anything more than it can be heard from there, period. That's a fact.
To what end? What is the purpose of stating that
Then
fact?
people can make their own opinion about what that means.
Okay.
But it is
I don't
still a
sign the letter, then.
fact.
If it's in there, I won't sign the letter. So
Okay.
it's that simple.
Okay, so do we send it from 5?
Well, listen, I wrote the letter. It
did.
looks like, Sean, if I took that one sentence out, starting with the elementary school students, would you be comfortable signing the letter?
I'll compromise with you. I think the whole bullet is unnecessary, Eric, but if you take out the school kids stuff,
This,
I think it's
well,
unnecessary.
I'm going to sign the letter, but I think the letter is a piece of shit, frankly, because it doesn't do what I want to do, which is not have excuse my language, but I'm just so pissed off about this. I don't want this thing in our town, and I'm pissed off at the fact that we are this far down the road. In the line in here that says the town of Simsbury believes that it's imperative for the town and state to engage in good communication and information sharing on this project. That means we've just said, just make sure we know what days you guys are in here town and going to be building it because we've already accepted. And that's not what I want. I don't accept this at all. We're caving and saying we're getting it. But in the spirit of working together as a group here, I'm going to sign the letter and send it. But this doesn't represent how I feel about this project.
I mean, that's fair, Chris, but it's state property, and the reality is folks think we have this all-knowing, all power on the Board of Selectmen. We have no role in this process other than
Right, but my point to you, Sean, is that I don't agree with this letter, and I'm signing it collaboratively as one group.
I think we're using a fear-mongering statement that's in the news that's pointless in this process. If we want to say that if we all believe that the police need a good training facility, that's a really good reason why it shouldn't be here. It's a lousy facility. It's a lousy location. It's nowhere near the highway. Maybe there's pollution issues. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know that. But the cops need to get trained. Right? It's got to go somewhere.
I totally agree. We should, the state police in this state, with the tax base we have, with the budget where it is, we should have a world-class facility that is the best of it should be the envy of 49 other states.
Right off
and that
84,
does
right
not
off
happen
91.
in that little turd of a lot off of the river on where it is right now. It's embarrassing to the state police.
It is.
We are embarrassing them by allowing this to happen.
And I think that's the argument, is it has no business being there because it's not an adequate facility. 100% agreement.
Well, so then, do we table this letter and write a new draft that just says, what you guys are saying, we don't want it here, period? I mean, that's what it sounds like you guys are saying. This was a compromise to cover as many points as we could here to kind of maintain a little bit of, not impartiality, but, we do have to support our state troopers. I mean, if they're, I'm not going to use the word, but if they are silly enough to dump $10 million into that property of our state money, I'm not sure what our recourse is against that, right? So if that's their choice, the state choice, then do we send a letter at all? Because you can go out and, send flyers or meet with Bob and petition, for this kind of stuff if this is really what you think.
I mean, I don't understand this, and again, I'm led to believe that there was litigation on the property next door.
I don't know.
This is getting way murkier than I think it was supposed to be when we first started talking about this.
Well, I won't say where I'm coming from, but I
understand where you're coming from. I respect it. I think
I-
we all unanimously agree, I think, that it's a lousy facility and it doesn't belong there.
Okay.
I mean, if that's what we're trying to say, then take the first bullet out. But if we're going to bring in political issues and other things that have no bearing on whether the adequacy of the facility, then I'm not in support of this letter.
Well, originally, I could go back to this. Originally, I didn't look at it from the perspective of it being a crappy facility, that we needed an indoor facility. That's not my purview. I'm no specialist on a state police gun range. That was all information presented to us by a resident.
Well, it's in
So
the
I didn't
report
want
too,
to,
right?
pardon me?
It's in the report too.
But this was before the report, and when we started talking about this, I looked at it from a perspective of a resident, business, living in Simsbury. What's the impact to me? Do I sit and think that the state police should have a better facility because I live up by Latimer Lane? No, I don't think that. I think of what do my kids hear when they walk to school? What do I hear when I'm sitting in my backyard? That's what I would think about, right? If the letter should be that we don't want it here at all and to stay away from Simsbury, then that's different.
So call the question.
What's the question? There's no vote on this. I mean, what's
Well,
the
I'm not-
question?
So, I mean, again, so whoever wants to
So
sign it
do we
can
just
sign it.
table the draft? I mean, like,
So listen, guys, I'll move to approve this letter with striking the sentence that starts with elementary school students.
it's one of the sentences I liked. So,
So moved.
I moved it, so you seconded it?
so you're taking out this whole section.
I'm proposing we just remove the sentence about the students.
Okay.
You're gonna call a vote, Wendy?
Did somebody second it?
Chris seconded it.
Second, yeah.
Okay, that's a tough one. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Go with the group, I
Yeah.
guess.
We'll put it in the mail.
There it is.
Okay.
Democracy beautiful?
It is, with the CCs included on there. Yes. Okay, all right. So I think somebody wants to move that we get to, no, the Granby Simsbury Chamber of Commerce merger, but we don't need to talk about that, right?
Just unless anybody had any significant concerns about the merger, each member will be asked to cast an official vote. The town of Simsbury, we are a member of the chamber. As I had mentioned previously, Melissa and I are supportive of it. And unless, again, the board has some significant concern with the merger, when the time comes, we would, plan to vote yes. And then again, thank you, Heather, for referencing the informational sessions that are upcoming. So that might be a good opportunity too. If somebody does have a lingering question about the merger, I think that these will be some really good opportunities for folks to hear some more information on it.
So how does that work? Do we have to vote to empower somebody to vote, or does the member, how does that work?
Yeah, we had, discussed, this, and again, the recommendation was that we just bring it to your attention, let you guys know that, we would be planning to cast a yes vote, but again, I think typically a lot of these types of things we've just handled by consensus. If you all feel more comfortable doing an affirmative vote, I don't think there's any harm in that either.
Oh, now?
I-
I
No,
thought
just-
it was just on the table that this hasn't happened yet. The vote's not till,
I mean, I
you were
think,
looking at me like I was supposed to.
I mean, my opinion is because we're bounding the town of Simsbury to a vote, it should be the six of us, but I don't know.
If you feel more comfortable, I don't think there's any harm in that. If you'd like to take a formal vote before we cast, the vote or essentially the ballot, it is expected in early March. So if you feel more comfortable and want to maybe take a formal vote on it following the information sessions, we could do that.
Yeah,
at the
let's
February
do that
28th
because we
meeting.
don't know enough.
Yeah.
What's the benefit
Okay,
to us?
we can bring that back on February 28th. That's no problem.
And again, I mean, we approve everything as a legislative body, so it just seems to make sense that we would do
Yeah,
that.
we could do that. That's no problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Okay.
For helping me. Okay, so I'm going to ask for a motion that we move to executive session. We still have an executive
If I don't give
session.
it to you, can we go home? Second.
Okay. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we're moving.